morning, and welcome to the 35th anniversary of the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation Weekend. I am your host, Natalie Hall, the Executive Director for the Hall of Fame. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We have a wonderful full day of programming ahead of us. The National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation is dedicated to the growth and development of HBCUs through scholarships, internships, training and technical assistance, alumni recognition, and programs that encourage humanitarian involvement. Our aim is to advance the reality that HBCUs are valuable treasures and critical resources that help transform the seeds of potential into the fruits of possibility. It is our hope that today's panel discussions will educate and enlighten everyone in attendance. Let's also not forget to thank all of our valuable sponsors who have made this event possible. Thank you, Wells Fargo, Delta Airlines, Verizon, Georgia Pacific, Merck, AT&T, and the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority. We appreciate your partnership, and we're thankful that you see the value that our organization provides HBCUs. Let's listen to the two of our sponsors for this morning's sessions, Wells Fargo and Verizon. After that, Hank Stewart will perform a spoken word for the Call to Womanhood. We will then hear words from the Call to Manhood sponsors, Georgia Pacific and Merck. And Mr. Stewart will return for a spoken word for our Call to Manhood session.
This is how you turn a house into a home your children's kids can someday own. This is how empowered becomes empowerful.
Hi, my name is Michelle Arrington, and I manage the Community Engagement and Government Affairs Group for Verizon in Atlanta, Georgia. Verizon is proud to serve as one of the sponsors for the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame and its 35th Anniversary Hall of Fame weekend. It is exciting for us to support the mission of the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame and its dedication to the growth and development of HBCUs. This mission aligns directly with Verizon's understanding that education is the foundation for building a more sustainable future. It's why Verizon has and will always continue to support historically Black colleges and universities throughout the nation. At Verizon, we know that education is the fuel that powers innovation and creates a more sustainable future. Congratulations.
The room, there was something very special about her, something really unique. Not the kind of special you see as strange or weird or that she's some sort of freak. You see, she had what we would call it, and her it is extraordinary. Her it's got me tripping, I must admit. What is it? Well, I'm glad you asked, but let me suggest something, fellas. If you ever see it and it's available, do yourself a favor and make her your wife. You see, it is confidence, it's an air, it is pride. It knows how to handle adversity. It takes things in strive now. I'm talking about it. It cannot be inherited, nor is it willed, and it's not genetic. Just because your mother had it doesn't mean that it will grace you. I promise you, I've seen some ladies who thought they had it and they didn't have a clue. Now, I'm still talking about it. It knows when to speak and it knows when not to say a word. It is like Dom Perignon or Godiva chocolate. You see, it is preferred. It knows which fork to use. It frequents plays. It doesn't raise hell. Instead, it chooses to pray.
When she smiles,
you see, when she smiles,
you see it.
You see it.
When she laughs,
when she laughs, you hear it.
You hear it.
When she tells you something, you believe it.
You believe it.
When she hurts, you feel it.
You feel
to protect it. You see, every real man knows his life is incomplete without it. You see, for it, she's the prototype. It's like she doesn't walk, she glides, and around it is his life. Now, you can't find it in a special section of the store. You can't order it offline, and trust me, there'll be no articles about it from the press, but one thing for sure, it sure knows how to wear a sundress. It can't be defined by height, age, shape, color, size, or any of those things. It could be single, divorced. It might be wearing a ring. You see, it is all or none. You can't have just a little bit of it. It is classy, sophisticated, and elegant. You tell by the way it stands or the way it sits. Now, how many ladies out there believe you have it? Raise your hand. Put your hands down, because it cannot be claimed. It is humble. It doesn't even know it has it. It is just that plain. Now, there's no classes or seminar you can take for it, and you can't study it in a manual. It is not a membership-based club. You can't pledge. And there's no fees to be renewed annually. It is a lot of things, but it gives more than it takes. For all that it is, one thing, you can't fake it. I need it. I need it. Gotta have it. Gotta have it. And she's got it. Because she's got it. I want it. I want it. I need it. I need it. I've gotta have it because she is it. She's got it. I want it. I need it. Because she's got it. I want it. I need it. Gotta have it. Because she's it.
Georgia Pacific invests in organizations that seek to break down barriers to education, ensure equal justice, address persistent poverty, and promote understanding between people of different races, backgrounds, and perspectives. Our vision of a just society, where everyone has an opportunity to reach their full potential, is at the heart of our people and our work. As committed corporate citizens, we'll continue to do our part to fight for the equal rights for all and an unmovable belief in the inherent dignity of every person.
Four of you, hands up. What were you doing? Why are you moving your hands around so much? You're making me nervous, man. Hands up! Hands on the Get your hands up, I'm gonna shoot you. I will shoot you. Hands up! Hands up! Hands up!
Oh, the injustice that we suffer, economic inequality. Are you mad? We can't seem to wake up while the powers that be slowly steal the dream. Are you mad? No prayer, no communication. The family structure is almost gone, almost gone. Are you mad? Hard pressed to find a house where the mother and father still at home.
I'm mad, but I'm mad about a lot of things. I'm mad about more than iced tea and Skittles on hands up where I can't breathe. I'm also mad about black on black crime. I'm mad about kids fighting and dying over sneakers like Jordans and killing each other over a dime, or I'm mad about mothers leaving their young children at home alone or leaving them in hot cars. I'm mad about men having to be held accountable to being fathers through legislation or law. I'm mad that we have to be encouraged instead of running to register and vote. With all the blood that our ancestors shed, people like C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, Jimmy Lee Jackson, and so many others with billy clubs are beaten over the head. Or I'm mad that our churches are not what they used to be. And I'm mad that policemen can shoot and kill innocent black people and then walk around free. I'm mad that we don't eat at black restaurants and shop at black stores. I'm mad at the people that came before us to help us get that corporate job. Now we don't even invite someone in behind us, we lock the door. I'm mad that young ladies are getting pregnant without ever thinking about marrying the father. And I'm mad that young men are getting these young ladies pregnant and then moving to the next one like the last one was just a bar. I'm mad that adults and children don't say thank you or please. I'm mad that we're not teaching our young boys work ethic like cutting grass and raking leaves. I'm mad that in Africa, little kids don't have shoes. And I'm mad that people like Clarence Thomas, Stacey Dash, and Charles Barkley don't have a clue. I'm mad that during Christmas time, people can give gifts without ever saying Christ. I'm mad that we have homeless people that we won't give pennies, but we'll walk right into the store and buy red bottoms, rims, or jewelry without even looking at the price. I'm mad that the Democrats and the Republicans seem to be the same. Services being cut and deleted while Congress and Senate up on the Hill playing games. I'm mad that we're listening and dancing to music that degrade our women, and that athletes won't band together for a civil rights cause. Don't they know they're more than what they do on the turf court or diamond, running, throwing, and shooting the ball? I'm mad at cancer, and I wish cancer would get cancer and die. I'm tired of cancer taking our loved ones beyond the sky.
But I'll see you again. Oh.
I'm mad that parents can find time to do almost any and everything and can't find time to go to a PTA meeting at their child's school. I'm mad that we're losing our history. By the way, I'm still waiting on my 40 acres and a mule. I'm mad that the Montgomery boycott, Selma, March on Washington all seem to have been for naught. All the civil rights leaders we lost during that era, not to mention the way Medgar and King was shot. I'm mad that we don't have a bill for the Voters' Right Act. And we're not saying anything, but let something happen with an entertainer. On social media, it blows up how easily we distract. I'm mad, I'm so mad, I'm mad that you're not mad. How can we just sit there, and if we're not careful, what we have would be what we have? Will I keep on fighting and grinding and trying to live a life of substance? Because Edmund Burke said it best. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. But I'm still mad. Are you? If so, what are you gonna do?
Are you mad? Situation's critical. Are you mad? Are you mad? Are you mad? When we can pass the homeless on the street, when all they want is money just to eat. Are you mad? We can make a difference when we're mad. Oh, are you mad?
What a great performance by Mr. Hank Stewart. Now, without further ado, let's get ready to go to our virtual breakouts. Everyone, please return to the Hall of Fame website at nbcahof.org to join these sessions. Ladies, click to join the Call to Womanhood with Judge Glenda Hatchett on your left, and gentlemen, you will click to join Call to Manhood with Dr. Kenneth Harris on your right. I will meet everyone in their receptive rooms in 3 minutes.
The one thing you don't do can often influence what you can do for years to come. When you don't vote, you help create a world that's the opposite of the one you want to live in and lose out on the opportunity to protect that future for generations to come. Hi, I'm Crystal Brooks, a graduate of Fisk University and the reigning Miss National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame. Today, perhaps more than ever in recent history, our vote has the power to make a lasting difference that will resonate today and tomorrow, not just for African Americans, but for all Americans who believe we are a nation formed to ensure and protect the rights and freedoms of all people. As young adults, we're busy trying to figure out our own lives, careers, and futures. We have a lot of pressures to deal with already. But as important as those things are, without different leaders who support the fulfillment of our dreams and our right to pursue them, everything we're working for and toward becomes just that, a dream. But your vote matters. Keep the dream alive. If you're 18 years of age or older, don't walk, run to register to vote. There's not a moment to waste with the very important midterm elections only months away. Visit NBCAHOF.org for more information on how you can make your voice heard this November. Do your part. Vote.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I just keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody, can't let them turn me around, Lord, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I just keep on walking, oh, I keep on because I'm marching on the freedom land. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse, ain't let it turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me around. You know I keep on, I just keep on because I'm marching on the freedom land. I can't let segregation turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let segregation turn me around. I just keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom land. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse, can't let it turn me around, Lord, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no jailhouse turn me around. I just keep on walking, keep on talking, because I'm marching on the freedom.
I hope everyone had a chance to get a bite to eat, because you don't want to miss our next session on social justice and civic engagement, which will be moderated by Mary Pat-Hector. But first, a word from our session sponsors, AT&T and Wells Fargo.
These days, it's anything but business as usual. That's why working together is more important than ever. AT&T is committed to keeping you connected so you can keep your patients cared for, your customers served, your students inspired, and your employees closer than ever. Our network is resilient. Our people are strong. Our job is to keep your business connected. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do.
This is how you turn a house into a home your children's kids can someday own. This is how empowered becomes empowerful.
Again, thank you, sponsors. Now for the introduction of our moderator for the Social Justice Civic Engagement session. Today's moderator is Mary Pat-Hector. Mary Pat-Hector is a graduate of Spelman College and a current graduate student at Georgia State University. She began community organizing at the age of 12 years old. By the age of 19, she became the youngest woman and person of color running for public office in the state of Georgia, losing only by 22 votes. Mary Pat-Hector serves as a program strategist at Rise Incorporated. She is also the Georgia Black Youth Vote Coordinator. Mary Pat has led and organized hunger strikes and organized rallies to end police violence in communities of color and developed youth entrepreneurship programming that has assisted hundreds of young people to kickstart licensed businesses. One of her proudest accomplishments is becoming a Fellow of Peace First. Let's not waste any more time. Mary, we are ready to get this powerful discussion started.
Everyone, it is Mary Pat-Hector. I serve as the Georgia State Coordinator for Black Youth Vote. I'm excited to be here with you all today. I have not missed one Hall of Fame event, and this year is no exception, despite the fact that we are virtual this year. And today we will be joined by an amazing panel, some amazing individuals, where we will be having an intergenerational conversation that's so important for the times that we're in today. Before we begin the panel, I do want to just leave at least 5 seconds of just silence in memory of two amazing women, both Breonna Taylor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This week, the Black community, especially Black women, I believe, were shocked by the news that the officers in the death of Breonna Taylor would not be charged in her murder. And so I do want to give 5 seconds for both Breonna Taylor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, thank you, panel, for that time. I felt like it was very important for us to just start this conversation on that note. So I'll go based off of the people that I see on the screen, and I allow them to share a little bit more about themselves, but I'll tell you, everyone on this panel is nothing but exceptional. And we'll start with my leader, Dr. Gerald Durley. How are you, Dr. Durley?
Good.
If you can tell the people a little bit more about you.
Hello, thank you so much, Mary Pat. It is a real honor to be here, I guess, having been inducted in 2007 with the Hall of Fame. I'm Gerald Durley, Pastor Emeritus of Providence Missionary Baptist Church. I was there for 25 years. I started in the movement, the Civil Rights Movement, in 1960. I was president of the student government in 1963. John Lewis and I came together in Nashville in 1960. I led the students there for many years. My senior year, I was out there on the mall. I was a foot worker out there on the mall. And then I felt that America was too racist for me. So I left America and moved to Africa in 1964. Lived there in Africa for 2 years. And then I came back after graduating and then got involved with the Panther Party in Chicago in 1968. And after that, I went on to finish a master's degree in divinity from Howard and then a doctorate degree from University of Massachusetts. And then I pastored Providence here in the city of Atlanta for 25 years and head of Concerned Black Clergy. And now I concentrate a lot on something that's negatively, disproportionately impacting us as Black people: climate change, global warming, and environmental justice, tying the civil rights movement to the environmental movement. And then I was Dean at Clark here in Atlanta, Georgia, and also Dean at the Morehouse School of Medicine, all during these 35 years I've been on the planet.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dr. Durley. We'll go on to Ms. Felicia Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Felicia Davis, and I also want to give props and a shout out to the Hall of Fame. I can say that we were seeking to partner in person with the National Technical Association and Clark University. I can say all of us are online live from Atlanta. So that did wait for next year. I'm sure we'll be together in person. I am the convener for the Black Communities in Clayton County. And we have Georgia Black Women's Roundtable. It's part of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. I am proud to say I am the original founder of Black Youth Vote that has grown and expanded now under the leadership and partner of our own Mary Pat-Hector. And I have to say that my work, my focus for 20 years has been climate change and environmental justice. So I've had the pleasure of working with Durley and was one of the early people lifting up climate change as a quintessential issue for our times. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I throw it back to you, Mary Pat.
Thank you so much. We will have I believe, Student Government Association of Fort Valley State University, one day the President of the United States, Alexander Lowe. How are you, Alexander?
I'm well. How are you doing?
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. So for everyone, I am Alexander Benjamin Lowe, a senior mathematics and computer science major from Covington, Georgia, now humbly serving as the Student Government Association president at Fort Valley State University. And I'm, shout outs to the National Black Hall of Fame to giving me the opportunity to speak amongst these titans of individuals in history and cultural and civil justice and everything. And I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, to get that student perspective and also to learn myself, because there's definitely a lot I need to grow and understand.
Thank you so much, Alexander. I believe we were joined by our fourth panelist, Richard Rose. How are you, Mr. Rose?
I'm great. How are you today?
Wonderful. If you can, please tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Richard Rose, president of the Atlanta NAACP. By profession, I'm a certified public accountant, HBCU grad at Clark, Atlanta, and happy to be joining this panel. I know it's going to be some great, interesting comments, and it's timely. This is America that we haven't seen in such turmoil since 1968. And so I think it's time for all of us to become engaged. NAACP pushes voting. And this is the time we do it. It's not only our best tool, it's really absolutely a must tool.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rose. And we have Karen Rene. How are you, Ms. Karen? She has to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had unmuted. Hi, I'm Karen Rene. I'm also with the Atlanta NAACP. I'm the second vice president here. And I'm also an elected official, city council for the great city of East Point. I'm looking forward to this great forum. I think that we have a lot of great things to discuss and to share with the viewers. And so I'm just really excited to be on the panel. Now, there's a lot of things that we could do on the local level to help improve the quality of life for all of our people. So I'm ready when you guys are.
Thank you all so much. I guess we'll go ahead and dive right on into the questions. So right now we are in the middle of a pandemic. Racial tensions are high and many are demanding for police reform. We just lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Many are concerned about losing a potential seat on the Supreme Court. So there's just so many things going on, and people are asking, why should I show up to the polls on November the 3rd? The recent situation with Breonna Taylor has cost many people who have been on the grounds for the past few months hope. So why do you believe it's important for people to show up to the polls on November the 3rd? And we'll start with Dr. Durley.
Thank you so much. I think what impresses me most today as we go into this dialogue is something you said, Mary Pat, earlier, an intergenerational dialogue. I remember once certain people were saying, we want to do just like you all did in 1960. That would be very difficult because times have changed, even though the same problems are there in terms of institutional racism, in terms of the kind of police brutality that we're facing, but times have changed. So it's very critical now that this intergenerational conversation occurs so we can just share with what we've done with what you all are doing, and when the two come together, it can be a difference. I think it's extremely critical now for all of us to involve with the dots that you talked about. You talked about the social justice issues around the Supreme Court. You talked about the pandemic. You talked about police brutality. And all of those things are integrally important because there's something that moves us as a Black people, and that is economics, education, and healthcare. And all of these things are integrated. And in order for those things to be changed, it is absolutely essential that this generation now, coupled with us, go, and I'm sure you're gonna hear it over and over, get out to vote, because we found out that voting makes a difference. That's what John gave his life for. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she gave her life for that. So I think it's absolutely essential that we understand that everything that we do now is directly related to the uplifting of the civil and the human rights of those that we're around every day, regardless of what our particular profession might be. So it's going to be around the voting, but in order for people to get out to vote, we've got to understand the significance. That's why all of the discussions that you're leading today is so critical. And I think that that's why it's important for us to get out, because all of the things that directly impact us, health, economics, education, the overall welfare is what we fought for then. We're fighting for the same thing now, and it's going to come through the same process, the voting process.
Thank you so much. Miss Felicia, I spoke to Helen Butler about a few days ago on a platform similar to this, and I said, I've seen the work that the National Coalition for Black Civic Participation has done over the course of a few years. My first presidential election was the 2016 election, and it was then that I understood the importance of the organization. Like, I knew about the organization, I grew up in the organization, but just the meaningful impact of the work that the organization did in the 2016 election took me by storm, as well as today. And so this is a question that I have for you, why do you believe it's important for us to show up to the polls? I know Black women show up to the polls all the time, every time, and we can rely on them. But if you're speaking to younger Black women, what do we say to them? Why should they go?
Okay. I have a little bit different take on the vote than some people in terms of my why, okay? Because if we look back in history, people often think that the first time we got the right to vote was in 65, 66 and on. But no, we know there was the first Reconstruction, that was kind of the second Reconstruction. And so young people are very smart and sophisticated, and they look around and they say, but wait a minute, we voted and then we still have this condition, right? Which is a very astute assessment. For me, voting is about organizing. And A. Philip Randolph said, who was a tremendous organizer, that whatever you're gonna get, you can't get anything without organizing. So the vote is an opportunity to organize and mobilize our community. As we do that, we have lanes and captains, and we then focus first at the local level, so our cities, our communities, and then we build that out to include our states and in fact our nation and the world. So for me, the vote is an opportunity to organize. And right here, right now, I'm saying to young people, there's a quote the professor that I work with at Clark Atlanta says, how long will God hold the train for us, right? So if we look at this COVID moment, for all of the impact, things are as flat as I've ever seen it. Right now, we can get online, we can talk to one another, we don't have to travel. Young people have the opportunity to step forward, and the vote is a tool, a focused tool for them to organize. And then showing up on the polls, that's my proof that you did your job. If you've been out, if you made calls, if you text people, if you help a neighbor, older people to get that absentee ballot, if you have done your part, don't worry about, oh, well, what happened last time and what happened next time. Organizing is about getting organized. And if our young people would organize, then you can move forward collectively. And the strength and the power right now, when our community is under assault, because people say, oh, we have existing conditions. Well, yes, we'll get to that why, because Dr. Durley is going to talk about the impacts and the environmental stresses that we have. Right now, we are counting. It is up to young people. Do your part.
Yep. So I have another question for Alexander, Richard, and Karen, and that is, many young people are not enthusiastic about the candidates in the upcoming election. What are issues that you believe would encourage them to vote? And why do you think it's important for them to vote in this election? I understand the importance of the fact that, you know, other than the presidential election, there are other elections taking place that day and will be on their ballot. But what would you say to get them enthusiastic about participating due to the fact that they're not excited about the candidates that they have to vote for? And we'll start with Alexander, who happens to be a millennial.
All right, thank you for that question. There's a lot to unpack in that, but let me start with this. Personally, I don't believe it's important to vote in this election. I believe it's important to vote in all elections, right? And I'm not fully sure, but I think there's a level of individual focus we put on each election instead of the aspect of this should be a regular occurring duty, right? You know, this should be something you do just like brushing your teeth every morning. You make sure you put your vote and your perspective out there. And that's something I'm trying to shift in terms of the culture and the mindset, you know, on my campus when I talk to my peers, because it shouldn't be, this is only important every 4 years, right as we're going into it. And so that is my individual perspective on that. But in terms of, you know, if they're not connected to the individual candidates and things of this nature, I feel like there was an interview I watched recently where Barack Obama kind of put things in a way that I really liked, that if you continuously work towards things intentionally, they do get better over time. Expecting an immediate shift of things getting better is very unrealistic. And I think we've done that with past presidents. That's why there's such a huge focus on that top seat, even though government is about the organization of a lot of people. So I think, one, we shift the narrative of voting being a regular occurring process, and sometimes slow process towards growth, but a continual one. And then the second piece is, if you don't like the people running and representing you, you know, you need to go up and step in and do it yourself. That's a thing for me on campus. You know, I wanted to make a specific change to my campus. I wanted to see something specifically done. So instead of just saying it out loud or throwing it on Twitter, I stepped into the position to try to be a part of that change directly.
Thank you so much. Richard or Karen, whichever wants to go first.
I want to step in just for a second. I think what happens is there's so many myths that we hear when we're out doing voter registrations. One is voting registration is hard. They don't know how, can't find it. But in fact, a lot of the states have made it very easy just to register online to vote. I've heard young people say that my vote doesn't count. Fact of the matter that all votes count. And if we as a group or elected as people, we could really change some outcomes. The fact of the matter is, there was a study that was done that millennials and Generation Z combined, they outnumber the baby boomers. And if they actually came out in numbers and voted, they could really truly flip an election. Also, the elections that are turned out in general, is the rating, the numbers are about at 60%, and they may fluctuate from time to time, but generally they flow right at 60%. If millennials and Generation Z came out and voted, they could change policies that they want to see happen in their lives. We must believe that voting changes policies and legislations. And number one is that these criminal justice laws that are are happening and the police brutalities, we can all affect change by absolutely going to the polls and voting. And when you say that your voting doesn't count, there have been senators in this United States that have won an election by 2 votes. George Bush, and I forget which one, won an election by less than 537 votes. So every vote matters, and young people, we have to dispel the myths that voting doesn't matter. When you look at older people, one of the reasons, I'm an elected official, so one of the reasons why elected officials listen to older people is because, one, they know that they vote. If an elected official comes up and say, hey, I'm gonna cut off the check of a Social Security check of older people, guess what the older people is gonna do? Vote that elected official out of office. They're gone, and we all know that. Let's be very clear. One of the reasons why Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, is a second vice president that is running as a Black female is because what? Black females have been one of the largest voting blocs since the Democratic Party, since we've been allowed to vote. So we've been pretty much carrying, and I want to say this, and I say this carefully, that the Black women has been truly carrying, and one of the largest voting blocs for the Democratic Party was able to say, we want to see a Black woman in that position. Now, we didn't say which one, but we were able to say, we think it's time and we want a Black woman in that position. Oh, guess what? We may not vote in this upcoming election. That is the power of the vote. And so, so when young people, we really need you on the ground. You can truly affect change if all of us voted in a collective block. Thank you.
Sure. So just to echo that from Karen and from Ms. Davis, it is about organization and structure. Everybody we read about the Boston Tea Party. Well, the Boston Tea Party was not about the tea or the brand of tea or where the tea came from. It was about who controls the tariffs that was related to the tea, who has the power of the purse. And that's what our political structure is about. It's about control of resources and control of services. So we have to vote, and not only is the vote important, but the threat of a vote is important. If they know that you will vote and will vote them out, they pay attention, politicians pay attention to your interests. Right here in Atlanta, we have a great example of what the power of the vote is. When Maynard Jackson was elected mayor of Atlanta, the first Black mayor of Atlanta, we were in the midst of airport rebuilding, a change in air traffic. And so he said that unless Black contractors participate in building in this airport, there won't be an airport. Some of the things that he put in place then, you know, in the last century, we're talking about in the 70s, are still in place in Atlanta today and have been copied by and mimicked by other cities across this country. So that vote made a difference. Your vote matters, and it matters if you don't vote. And that's what's most important. One of the things that you have to remind people is that one of the objectives of the Ku Klux Klan was to stop Black people from voting through violence, through all kind of efforts, poll taxes, economic threats. And when we don't vote, we fulfill the greatest wish of the Ku Klux Klan.
Karen, could I
Thank you
say,
so much. Oh, go ahead.
I wanted to say, one of the things that when you talk about why don't young people vote as we would vote came out, they say older folks get out and vote. One of the things that I think was so critical that we knew in the vote, we knew the consequences if we didn't vote. And I wonder sometimes now, and I would love to, this is the intergenerational, I'd love to get the input from the young people in particular on the call, because we knew in terms of segregated housing, in terms of first fired, in terms of last hired, we knew the consequences if we didn't. But we've become somewhat comfortable now, I mean, in terms of the young people have much more physical kinds of things, much more access to hotels, to political offices. So therefore, the consequences of not voting may not be as paramount, not those of you on the call, but I'm talking about in general. So some kind of way to connect the dots to say your vote really, really impacts your life. In our cases, it impacted everything that we do. And in reality, it does the same thing now, but I don't think that it's as in your face for young people as it was in our face. So some kind of way to get back and connect the dot that this is very critical now, whether it's police brutality or whatever it is. And I think that if we can some kind of way connect the dots of the tremendous seriousness of what will happen if you don't show up. We knew what would happen if we show up. They get a new kind of rope, and we didn't want that kind of rope. Then we didn't want any kind of rope. So I think that that's going to be very critical as we get this generation out to do what we've done and do.
But Dr.
Alexander,
right now we have, our people are dying in massive numbers, 3 times any other people. Our children are in the street marching, yelling to people saying Black Lives Matter. So when I toss it to both Alexander and back to you, Mary Pat, it's like, to me, this is as critical as anything I've ever seen. And I went back, I did my homework, I went back to the 1800s. And what was on the thing? They wanted fair elections. They wanted an inter-racism in jobs and systemic racism. They wanted a criminal justice reform, then it was called penal codes and things. So as we're in this dialogue, I want to put the young people, it's like I'm saying, I see you. And it's like a moment to say, breathe, because we got to lean on you all to some extent. But I think it's more real for them than it ever was for me, because you're burying grandparents and aunties. You're scared to go visit them. You can't even get a hug. So I think these are critical times when we're talking about organizing in a space where we can't even touch.
Alexander?
Okay, excuse me for a moment. There's just really a lot to unpack there in everything that you guys are saying. Because I'm listening, I'm thinking about, my peers and our conversations. Because right now I'm on campus in Fort Valley, Georgia, at Fort Valley State University. And I think about, we see these things happening, we see it on our social medias and we have conversations about it, and then the information with Breonna Taylor. And I really try to wonder, why isn't that enough per se, or how does it really change how we move? I think, I'd like to think we're all aware. I don't know. Is it a world of distractions that we live in now, to where we have so many other different priorities or so many other focuses that we don't truly focus on what per se is the most important thing? Is it a combination of just apathy or tiredness of it because we keep hearing it and it continues to happen in some aspect that we've given up? And I say that and I'm not fully sure. My perspective, I'm a very optimistic person, and I like to be a part of the solution. When I speak, I like to bring solution and positivity, because I think there's already enough negativity in the world. But I realize that isn't a viewpoint that all my peers share. I don't know. I feel like, again, there's a combination of the distractions of the world where we've set priorities or created priorities that make us lose focus on what's important. Then I think a lot of people don't ultimately believe they can actually do anything about it deep down, right? And I think
I think we're losing Alexander a little bit, but I completely and totally agree with something that he stated when it comes to people not believing deep down. Oh, I think we got him back. You were messing up a little bit. I was telling him that I agree with something that you said when it came to young people not believing that their vote counts deep down, and I'll tell you why. And when I hear young people tell me when I'm in the field telling them to register to vote, to go to the polls and vote, they'll say, what's the point? We have corrupt leaders, corrupt politicians, they never do anything for me. And I say, you know what, you have a point, because in a time like this where things are so critical, you know, you even have a president, I'll tell you, Lyndon B. Johnson wasn't the best at race relations, but he still signed the Civil Rights Act, right? You know, we had Black cities across the country having conversations on criminal justice reform, and Black elected officials refused to even consider what their communities would look like with such reforms, and voted no, whereas white cities were progressing like Minneapolis and others. And so instead of thinking these politicians or elected officials aren't looking out for me, let's think, how can we get rid of them? How can we replace them? How can we replace them with people who are actually in our communities doing the work? And so when I hear young people say those things, I say, I agree with you. I understand where you're coming from. But instead of thinking at it from that perspective, let's look at it from this perspective. Because we could have changed the trajectory of this country had different major cities decided to implement police reform, had one or two states decided to do something when it comes to police reform. Could you imagine if a state like New York or California implemented something read police reform, how many states would then follow suit and do the same thing? It literally just takes one person, one state, one community to change the trajectory of our country. And that's something that we couldn't do, not even in the Black communities. And so I think what often happens is young people lose sight of just staying stern. So throughout the summer when you saw these protests, these young people stayed in the streets, but they also didn't have school. They didn't have sports. They had nothing else to do but protest for months on end. Now we're back in school. Now students are back in school. People are going back to work. And in the wake of Breonna Taylor, we're so distracted by the fact that Tory Lanez, who literally assaulted a Black woman, released an album, and we're streaming it. And so I think it's all about distractions and us not being able to stay focused, but we'll save that conversation for another day. Back to being civically engaged. Yeah, someone had a comment.
No, I want to say the key word that both of you all were going to, there's a key word that gives you energy to fight, and there's a certain sense of hope. And you use the term distraction. I like what Brother Lowe was saying, the distraction. And when you're distracted, you grow a certain sense of hopelessness. What's the use? Why should I register? We've got to now put the hope back into those kinds of feelings about why should I register? Why should I get involved? We always believed that we could win. We believed because we did not have a choice. But with all of the choices seemingly in 2021 and 2019, how do we limit those choices in you all? And I'm pushing the envelope for you with your generation to say, wait a minute, we're just like you all. We don't have a choice either, but the difference is there's a certain sense of hopelessness. Why should I do it? Why should I show up? Why should I come to the meeting? We said we've got to be there because if there's going to be any change, and we believed and had a hope that it would happen. Is that same hopeful feeling in this generation that they can make a difference, or have they thrown up their hands and say, well, I'll just finish up and move to my other neighborhood and let somebody else take care of themselves?
Go ahead, Alexander.
Okay, to respond to that, you know, hope's not dead. Hope can't be dead because one, hope starts with one individual and it spreads, right? So, and I know plenty of people. I think there's larger aspects of it, but I think you have to also be able to connect faith and hope similarly. And I think a lot of people struggle with their faith, so that might also be an aspect of hope. But I think we're so visual in terms of we see that this is going on and this is how things are and this is our situation. I think what's lost on a lot of people is a vision of better, right? I mean, some of our greatest leaders, like one of their intrinsic qualities and stuff that like connected them and it was so inspirational is that they saw better than the situation of which they were in.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that aspect of vision and how that connects to faith and hope. The vision might be lost. I don't think the hope and the faith is lost, because I feel like in our own moments, everybody wants to believe better and everything. But I think for some reason, we're waiting for something to show us to have that further sense of hope to take action. But the aspect of hope is that without seeing the opportunity, particularly, or like seeing the reason of success or the opportunity to be successful, you still put effort anyway. I mean, personally for me, you know, do I fully understand everything with voting? No. Do I fully understand everything about the candidates and everything? No. But I am here because I have hope that it's a part of that effort of change, that I can do something, right? It's not like if I'm not voting, I'm doing something else to better a cause and initiative. No, if I'm not voting, I would just be not voting. So why would I ever just not be a part of an opportunity of solution? You know, if you don't have a solution or you don't have a good effort, like, be a part of the ones that are already there. So that's a perspective I hold, and I think that's a conversation is there as well. But I would never subscribe to the idea that hope is not a part of this generation, that there's not hope anymore. I just think we're not focused.
We must say
I wanted to bring in Rene and Richard.
Mary Pat, before they get in, I just want to acknowledge that Black youth outvote all other youth. So
Yeah,
we're sitting here,
and specifically Black educated college students, Black women, Black
women vote the most,
students.
but Black youth, male and female, outvote all other youth, white, Latinx, etc. So, you know, I don't want to be in a conversation and act like we're laggards. Our people are leaders on the vote. We just want you to press up to where Black women are, because we are the masters of the vote. Sorry, I'll step back.
No problem. I wanted to bring in Karen and Richard. As the Black Youth Vote Georgia coordinator through the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda, I see you all when we were in the office quite some time dropping by the office because of the work that we do on the ground, voter registration and getting people, I guess, to turn up to the polls. During the primary election, Mrs. Felicia stated that we're not laggers. While there were protests happening each and every day, those same protesters headed to the polls thanks to the great work of many of the organizations on this call present, and made history in the state of Georgia by having what was the largest Georgia primary turnout rate in history. So I wanted to reach out to you all, and then Felicia, of course, and Dr. Durley and others can answer. But specifically, what is your organization doing to get out the vote and ensure that there is great turnout at the polls?
So Atlanta NAACP, for me, so Atlanta NAACP is collaborating with other NAACP branches across the state of Georgia. In Georgia, we have 159 counties. There are 19 counties that contain 77% of the registered Black voters. And we are focusing on those counties in a collaborative effort, doing phone banking, forums, other outreach, and also, with the census count. So its turnout is important. Voter registration is absolutely how you get in the door, but if you don't pull that lever, then you haven't accomplished what you need to accomplish. Let's be reminded that in 2016, I'm just talking about Georgia, in 2016, white women voters voted at 68%, white men voters 67%. Black women voters, who's normally the leading demographic, only voted at 62%, and Black men voted at 48%. Black men and women left 238,000 votes on the table, and Georgia was won by about 114,000 votes. We could have made a difference just by voting in the same percentages. And so the average was 53% for Black voters in 2016. We can make a difference, and we have more at stake than white voters because the systems are against us. We have to get out there and change these systems. We keep looking at claiming that, oh, it's just this one road cop or firing this police chief. The system is bad. The system was created bad. We have to change it. We call it restructuring public safety. We don't call it police reform, because we have to start with a new set of metrics. Who is allowed the power of a badge and a gun? You know, it can't be a high school graduate with 6 months of training. We see what the disaster that has been. So we have to, it's important for us, if we want to find, usher in a new age of reparations, if we want to find equality and equity, we have to change the current systems, which start with education, obviously, police reform, voting rights, economic opportunity. Just those 4 things that the NAACP was founded on.
Yes. Yes, what he said.
Yes. Are there any specific programs or initiatives your organizations are working on currently?
Yes, and for the Fulton County district areas, what we have partnered with some other organizations as well. But one of our #1 goals was to get out the absentee ballots. We've been working with Meals on Wheels. We know that there's a lot of seniors that will not be able to get to the polls, that are truly shut in, and we want to make sure that everybody has a voice on voting day. So we've been working with Meals on Wheels. We've been getting absentee ballots with them. In fact, we have an event with them this weekend. We started dropping off absentee ballots about a week ago, and now we're collecting those absentee ballots, getting them directly to Fulton County election boards. We have been working, we just celebrated National Voter Registration Day this week, and we celebrated the entire week. We've been at all of the MARTA stations across Fulton County, registering young people as they're trying to get to work and getting off work, or as they traverse throughout the city. We're doing a large voter registration at all of the Walmarts in the county and beyond. We're trying to capture everybody wherever they are to make sure we're registering voters throughout. We even did one at Slutty Vegan with People's Agendas about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that was a very large and successful outreach. I think we registered over 400 people in that particular day. So the Atlanta NAACP, the census is still viable. We have about 5 more days before the census. We're trying to make sure we capture all of the numbers and the data that we possibly can to improve the lives of these people, our people in the community. And so voter registration, and then after voter registration, we'll be focusing on rides to the polls. So we're asking everybody to make sure that you're registered for the November election. We still have an election right now that's going on, Congressman John Lewis' seat, the 5th district. That's coming up September the 29th. It's the final day for the vote for that. Right now, early voting is still going on. Actually, the last day for early voting is today for John Lewis to serve out the remaining of his term. So we're trying to galvanize, share the impact of the voting, and we're doing, moving a lot of balls right now. So if there's anything else that we could be doing, just kind of drop us an email.
Alexander, I'm very interested in seeing how we're getting out the vote on college campuses, especially because right now during this time, many students are not on campus.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can add a little bit more onto that. Okay, so for the Fort Valley initiative, in terms of how we're getting out the vote, our multiple organizations on campus are doing different voter registration, and my lead-in is to do a better job at organizing that, and that's something that we've been talking and facilitating. But for Fort Valley's sake, as we move forward, in the past we've done a march to the polls, and so we've done a march during that actual day to the polling site. We are having conversations with people about registering in this area, so we are voting specifically for Fort Valley State University's campus. And then we've also had conversations about absentee ballots for the people who still want to vote home and at home and everything. So that whole initiative is something that we've really let be spearheaded by our multiple organizations, our Greek organizations, our local NAACP chapter, things of that nature. And then we also communicate that with other HBCUs. I'm trying to think, what do they do? They've had, there are pledges, there are just different initiatives, but that whole energy and that spirit of voting is alive on campus.
Two of the things that we've done is that 2 weeks ago, we had a press conference with Reginald Jackson of the AME Church and the Concerned Black Clergy of Atlanta. Then we met with Secretary of State Raffensperger. We realized that the last time that people stayed in lines, polls did not open on time. Some of them were closed. Sometimes that many of the workers did not show up for certain times. So what we did, we met with him and we gave him 600 locations all throughout Georgia that can be poll sites. Some of them were in churches, some of them were in schools. About 7 of us met with him that these are sites. Then we gave him a list of over 200 to 300 people that can be pulled from these various churches around the state that can be used from a poll point of view. But we said also that you would have to guarantee that they would have the appropriate kind of PPE equipment and that they would be trained. And he took this under advisement. So we're saying we're doing it across the state with in smaller rural communities, but using, giving him, so there's no excuse that the poll was not open, that the poll work was not trained. The other thing, which is very interesting, is that starting today, from today until November the 3rd at sundown, across the city, across the country, Vashti McKenzie, Freddie Haynes, a lot of us came together, and Barbara Skinner out of Washington, Cynthia Hale here in Atlanta. We're starting, now sometimes they say that doesn't make sense, but today starts a 40-day fast. It will be 40 days to November the 3rd at sundown. So this morning it started that. Now what is that about? It's different people fast differently. Fasting and praying and staying active. Those are the 3 things. So that's going on now across the country. That started this morning at 6 o'clock, that will end at sundown on the 3rd. And as people through their congregations began to do the video and the virtual streaming, they can emphasize that. And what does that do? It keeps a certain conscious level about the importance of being out to vote. So that's what the faith community is doing, not only here locally in Georgia, but across the country.
Well, I'm in Clinton County, where part of our district is going out to vote for the remainder of the current John Lewis congressional seat. And of course, we'll have another election in November. So I've gone a little bit old school. And what I've done is to put together available resources and have people doing canvassing. They're being paid $15 an hour, 1 day a week, 4 hours, and they get $75 for the 4 hours plus a little mobilizing, and drivers get an additional amount. And the value is, I'm working with the union, IATSE union, that does the events at like the Georgia World Congress Center, et cetera. Well, they've had no work since the shutdown. And after the extended unemployment ended, then right after that, their insurance also ended. So for many of I have about 30 people that work with me on a weekly basis. And for them, $75 to $100 is stretching grocery money. But I cannot say how important and powerful that is when it comes to organizing. And we have been sticking, we're not talking to people at the door, we're doing door hangers on the door or the mailbox, not putting it in, but just hanging it there. And people have really come out of their house to greet our workers and ask for additional literature for them to share with their friends and family. So I think it's a powerful moment. And I think the motivation to go old school is because we cannot touch, and everybody is not on Zoom. So we're out in the community. We have picked the restaurants that are open. We have hit shops and other stores. We left materials, and you know we have our holding up for folks. We have quite a number. All of these folks are running for 1 Senate seat. So we have this card in conjunction with the People's Agenda and HBCU Green Fund and Georgia Stand Up. But every statewide candidate is on this little flyer. So I encourage for other areas, we have to give people the information that they need to go to the polls, especially when we have 26 people running for 1 Senate seat. We have to explain that there are 2 Senate seats. So we are on the ground distributing that kind of information together with the information, are you vote ready? Together with helping to get those absentee ballots requested. Together with following up to make sure that ballot gets completed. But Mary Pat, I'm sure you're going to mention your own HBCU challenge coming up.
Yes, so there are several things that we have been working on. I know for Black Youth Vote nationally, we do have an HBCU challenge. I'd love to get Alexander a part of that, where we're trying to get as many students from historically Black colleges and universities to the polls as possible through Black Youth Vote. And then also through the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda, along with the State Youth and Collegiate Division of the NAACP. We've partnered with the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame, the Lawyers Committee, New Georgia Project, Woke Vote, and a few other organizations to train as many Black students, not just historically Black colleges and universities, but Black students across the country to become poll workers and poll monitors. So with Black Youth Vote, we're doing this specifically with HBCU students and through the RISE initiative with the NCNW and other organizations. We're doing this for Black students all across the country. And so if that's something that you're interested in being a part of, please let us know. Also, we have a bonanza or an event for student organizations specifically in the state of Georgia. If your organization believes that it could get 100 students registered to vote in the state of Georgia or to commit to voting in the state of Georgia in 72 hours, that chapter of your organization could win $500. The organization with the most registered voters or committed voters. So for voters already registered, if they just commit to voting, that organization with the most commitments or registrations could win $1,000 on top of the $500. So we've been working and trying to incentivize and get student organizations and student leaders, specifically in the state of Georgia, to really do more to, one, not only just get students registered to vote, but get them committed to vote, getting them to make plans to vote. We understand that you can't just say, okay, well, I'm gonna show up and vote on election day. No, like we have all of this time between October 12th and October 30th to early vote and utilize that, right? So ensuring that they're also making educated decisions. We want our voters to be educated voters. We want them to know what's going to be on their ballot before they get there, who's going to be on their ballot before they get there, and what are the policies in which these elected officials or people wanting their vote stand behind. And so that's some of the things that we're doing through Black Youth Vote and the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. And also, if you're interested in being an election protection volunteer monitor, please reach out to Black Youth Vote Georgia on Instagram or GCPA Vote, where we'll be more than happy to train you and get you prepared to volunteer on election day. If you feel like you've already submitted your absentee ballot, you early voted, but you want to do more on election day, become a poll monitor, become an election protection volunteer. So that was a lot. That was a mouthful. But I'm very happy that your organizations are taking it above and beyond to really turn out the vote on election day. There are a few more questions that I have. I know we have about 30 more minutes of this conversation, and it's been packed for some time. And so if you are watching this on live right now, I am monitoring the Facebook page. Please feel free to drop any questions that you may have into the chat so that I can share it with some of the panelists that we have on with us today. So beside talking about the work that your organizations are doing. Many young people are demanding police reform right now. I know that that is a topic that's come up quite some time throughout the duration of this conversation. Besides police reform, what are some other policies that we should be focusing on that people aren't really talking about right now?
I want to say this. One of the things I think, and Richard could speak to this as well, I think what we should be doing is when we look at some of the policies that we have as far as under public safety and policing in our communities, we have one system pretty much that answers a lot of the calls, like 911. When you call 911, if your house is on fire, they send the fire truck, right? So if you have a health emergency, they send an ambulance. If you have any other thing that you may have going on, domestic violence, mental health issues, robbery, or anything else that's going on in your community, they send the police. Well, under new policies or public safety reform, we're asking that they have, if you call 911, if you have someone in your household that's having a mental breakdown or mental health issue, then send out a social worker or a psychiatrist. We need help and reform the social workers. Instead of hiring a lot more police officers, let's consider reforming some of the public safety initiatives that we have so that our communities can be covered all the way around. And social workers can be just a part of the 911 or the public safety factors. But when there's a call and there's a mental health situation or even a domestic violence situation, why not send a social worker to the scene? And if you need a backup where police officers are called, but let social workers and mental health professionals help resolve and de-escalate those situations. A lot of times, like for instance, in DeKalb County, remember the young man that was having post-traumatic stress syndrome?
Anthony Hill.
Right, Anthony Hill. And he had literally gotten butt naked and he was having a mental health crisis. Well, what happened was he was running away from the police officer and they shot him in the back butt naked. Or I'm sorry, running toward people, but he was shot butt naked with no weapon, no weapon on him at all. And had a social worker or a mental health official had been there, they probably would have been able to handle that situation a lot better and the outcome would have been a lot better. We've had so many calls, especially with the NAACP, where mothers are called, when they've called the police out to handle a situation in the house and they say on the 911 call, he is not taking his medication, we need help here at the house. A social worker or a health professional could have probably handled that situation a lot better. So those are some of the policies that we're asking to see changes in our communities.
Well, yeah, that was such a good point. We should have a percentage of the police officers have degrees in sociology or psychology. Maybe not all of them, but there's no reason why you can't graduate from college knowing something about psychology before you strap guns and mace, etc., to your hips. But I also want to mention that this institutionalized racism thing seems to have been the issue from day one. So, and the only thing that I see that gets at it is reparations. And not that you give any money or distribution, but unpacking the truth about the history of America. So for me, at the local level, so those are people that are city council members and mayors, it's time where we have power. We have to elevate the fact that we cannot have this false narrative that makes Black bodies expendable. Until we deal with what America thinks about a Black body, we're going to keep burying them. So in my opinion, that, my issue is climate change, but for my people, we've got to let it be known. We are not less than, we are more than equal. And in order to deal with that, our rallying mobilizing thing can be reparations for really the research behind it. And I know Dr. Durley and the NAACP and young brothers sitting on a HBCU campus is how do we get at that? Because there's a reason why you can keep your knee on the neck of a brother in the street in broad daylight. That's not exactly just policing.
You know, I'm glad that word that Mary Pat used. She didn't use defund. She said reform. That was very interesting when she said reform rather than defund. What I look at, if this whole thing is to change, there was a story once told about a group of people, and they were at the top of the hill, and the people kept falling off the cliff, and the ambulance would go down to the bottom of the hill and pick the people up, and they would fall off the hill, and they would pick them up. And everybody concentrated at the bottom of the hill working with the survivors. And they kept talking about how do we get the survivors down here at the bottom of the hill, get them to the hospital. I believe that what we need to do is put a fence at the top of the hill so that people don't fall off the cliff. In other words, put some things in place, and that's the education, that's the healthcare, that's jobs, that's employment at the top so we don't fall down here where all of the shootings and all of the killing and all of the suicidal actions that are occurring between the police and our community. Some kind of way we've got to put those structures in place where we don't fall down into this quagmire. And that's what I think that this whole thing around civil human rights, the voting has to be about putting the right legislative in, putting it at the Supreme Court, where we put the factors in place where we don't have a person who doesn't have a job, who's been disenfranchised, who's been in prison for 5 or 6 years. They get out because they have a felon record, they can't vote. All of those things need to be ameliorated so that there can be some kind of equality. But right now, if those other things that's systemic, as we call it, those systemic factors are not changed, we're gonna continue having this battle down here between the police and us.
So I'll hop in right here. There are two statements I want to speak on. One, the larger aspect of education that we just touched on. We put, just collectively, we've put the educating of Black people about our own history in the hands of people who didn't want us to go to schools in the first place, right? I mean, I just recently found out about golly, I feel, now I feel bad. Golly, schools that were specifically funded, created by this individual all across the United States of America before HBCUs. I'm totally, but
Rosenwald schools.
Thank you, Rosenwald schools. But see, that even that ineptness or that the ignorance that we've had, right? Why did I just figure that out as a college student, right? Why is that conversation of our history not there? And I think you guys really alluded to it, because education, and knowledge is, we've had that conversation of how that is power, right? But education and knowledge is also your experience, and we learn from our experiences. So if you control the education, you control the knowledge, you control people's experiences. And if you don't show them a reason why the reasons why they should be upset and the reasons they should be frustrated, until they encounter it, they're not going to personally connect to that. And I think that is a part of going back to the distraction conversation that we were saying that has been facilitated by education. And then the second piece I was going to speak on, if I can remember, because I just got myself worked up on that last part. We'll come back. We'll come back if I remember it. But I think that education piece is a huge part of it.
So let me just say this about education. That is a big problem. As you said, our system never intended to educate Black people. In fact, the part of the narrative to support in the enslavement of Africans in perpetuity is that we were less than. And so since emancipation, they've been trying to prove that we are less than by denying all of these educational rights. When Helen Plain, who was the visionary, who was the president of the United Daughters Confederacy and was the visionary behind the carvings on Stone Mountain, She wrote a letter to the sculptor to say she wanted to honor the Klan because, quote, they had saved us from Negro domination, end quote. And that the Klan was violent in keeping Black folk from voting and tearing up their businesses, running them off of farms. The two objectives of oppression are degradation and deprivation. Deprivation take all the resources. And that's what America has done. The oppression with Black folk is all over, the symbolism of oppression. All of these Confederate monuments were built not to celebrate the dead, but to subjugate the living. And let's look at education, back at education. Our current policy has property taxes to pay for education. And the level of resources is different. You take a county like Heard County in Georgia, they can afford maybe $8,000 or $9,000 per student. In Atlanta, they can afford $13,000 a student. Well, some of the private schools in Atlanta charge $29,000 per student to go to high school. So who gets the better quality of education? We have to change that paradigm. How do we finance education? Because I believe, for example, if you were admitted to a nursing home or a assisted living center, they take each resident and assess that resident, what they need, what they can do for themselves, what they can't do for themselves. I believe that kind of assessment ought to take place for every student in every grade of every school in America. What can that student do and do what is necessary to bring that student up or to show up his weaknesses and take advantage of the strengths. We have to stop looking at whether the school has failed. The schools haven't failed. Our system has failed. And that failure, I think, is somewhat intentional. We have to understand that if we're going to truly have a system of education, it has to take into consideration the differences of background, the differences of economics, and the differences of learning skills.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember my second point, and I just wanted to tag on to that again, because, yeah, you're right. And I remember learning about the property tax thing when I was early in high school. And it comes to a simple question. It's like, if property tax should determine the amount of money that goes towards a student's education, and you know that causes differences, like that immediately creates, even if you don't even look at, race, but we know that there's a huge part of that tied to it. Why? Of course, there would be disparities in people because someone's education would be more valuable in another specific area. So again, we have to ask ourselves those questions in terms of the larger aspect of policies that we need to change. But the second thing, to go back to the question that was asked, what are the things that legislators and politicians that they're not talking about relative to, us or, younger individuals, millennials or Gen Z? And I think the big thing, larger than any specific issue, right? And the thing that I think I ask myself is that, I'm just trying to make it, right? And I don't know how much that energy changes the older I get. Maybe I have a different perspective on that per se, but I know a lot for my peers. We want to be successful. We want to be able to have a family. We want to be able to feed ourselves, shelter ourselves, and everything. And I think until we get over that fear, I think once we get past that is where that fight or the willingness to stand out. Because I know people who have had opportunities where they were treated wrong on the aspect of race, or they're a part of something that they knew was not doing the best that it should be for them. But because of the aspect of they didn't want to rock the boat and they wanted to be able to make it and possibly just get in to make it better for people behind them, they didn't say anything, they didn't speak out, they weren't frustrated enough. And so I think that conversation of how do we really set a clear playing field, a clear base, a successful base for people to where they then feel empowered to speak out and to recognize the challenges around them, because I'm so caught up in, you know, just trying to make it to the next day per se, or my small week, or my small perspective, that I miss the larger disparities in the system that's happening continuously. And I think that
really quickly, we literally only have 2 minutes left. I would like to go through the panel and ask each person to give up their wrap-up remarks. So any last comments that you have, you can give in your wrap-up remarks, because we literally only have like three minutes left. So we'll start with Felicia.
My wrap-up. Historically Black colleges, universities, and churches, and I'm going to let Dr. Durley take care of churches, but for HBCUs, this country started selling people that look like us and working people who look like us without paying us. Those people, Harvard, Yale, etc., they have multi-billion dollars. They need to invest in HBCUs, and then we will take our institutions to design the education that we need for uplifting. And I will look up Dr. Benjamin E. Mays. If you haven't read it, read it. Ebony and Ivy. If you haven't read it, read it. When you put them together, that's where we need to go going forward. Use our institutions, NAACP, Black churches, and HBCUs, and we need to solve our own problems. That's my wrap.
Okay, we'll go to Dr. Durley.
Mine is very simple as that. And I go back to the theme that we briefly discussed. In each of us, we must renew that sense of hope, because the precursor to hopelessness is suicide. And many of us are going into psychological, suicidal positions. So we've got to renew that hope. And then iron sharpens iron. We need to speak encouraging to each other rather than downing each other. There's a saying that says, down not those who are down, cheer them up in their sorrow. But this old world is a funny old world, and you may be down tomorrow. So we've got to constantly say to each other, we're on the winning team. We've got to come together. Young, old, short, gay, lesbian, whatever it might be. That's going to be the strength that we once did. It's not that you're a doctor and you're a street sweeper. We're all in this together. And when we do that, then we know that we can win. That's the hope that will constantly make us move forward.
Dr. Rose.
So, you know, when soldiers go off to war and have traumatic experiences, they're treated for post-traumatic stress syndrome or post-traumatic stress disorder. Black folk have current stress. Our lives are stressful, which means that some of us are not going to be as strong as the other. We have to reach out and help each other and understand that when we get to these positions and elected officials, it is their responsibility to take into consideration all of the things that Black folks have to face. We have to vote, but we have to hold our elected officials accountable.
Right.
Ms. Rene.
Thank you. Real quick, there used to be an old saying, united we stand, divided we fall. And I just want to say we all must be united. We may have our differences in a lot of ways, but we must be united together to walk through to make sure all of our communities are together, that including our families. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Alexander.
All right. Again, thank you, everyone. To my peers, anybody who's watching this, you know, in my relative age range, recognize that it's okay not to have all the answers. You know, I don't feel I have all the answers. I learned stuff on this call today, and I would just say, search for better. Right? Don't get caught up in it being perfect. Don't get caught up in it being exactly what we need, but search for the better and then be able to reach for it through the darkness. Don't reach for it when it gets better. Reach for it so it will be better. And that's all I know how to subscribe to right now, because I don't have the answers.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame for allowing us to have this conversation. I think it was very informational and very insightful. If you're watching this, don't forget to register to vote before it's too late. Sign up to be a poll worker or an election protection poll monitor. And let's show up and show out on November the 3rd. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you, Mary Pat.
Alexander.
Great job.
Again, another great session on an important topic. Thank you, Mary Pat-Hector, for moderating this dynamic panel, and thank you, panelists, for your participation. Thanks again to our sponsors, Wells Fargo and AT&T. Our last panel discussion for the day is scheduled to start at 1:45 p.m., so please take a break and return back here shortly. Our final panel discussion of the day will focus on health and wellness. With everything that's going on in the world regarding COVID-19, this discussion is sure to provide extremely valuable information for everyone. Dr. Joshua Murfree of the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority has agreed to facilitate our discussion, but first, a word from our sponsor, the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority.
The Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority salutes all of our medical staff and workers, as well as all of the experts that have taken on this COVID-19 pandemic as heroes of today to safeguard the great citizens of this state and local municipalities. As our students, teachers, and administrators return to the classroom, we say thank you for being brave and taking a step forward. To our political figures, local and state, we say thanks. And to our colleagues that are returning to work sites from their shelter in place, we salute you for your steadfast attitude as we move into a new and unfamiliar frontier. Here at FDHA, we are laser focused as an organization to help make a difference in days to come. We encourage all to stay mindful and wear a mask, wash your hands, practice social distancing, and protect yourself and all others. Thank you for taking a moment with us here at the Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority.
Now for the introduction of our moderator. Dr. Murfree was appointed Director of the Athletics at Fort Valley State University with plans to build a comprehensive, competitive, and self-sustained athletic program where student athletes are placed in the best position to learn, succeed, achieve, and win. Dr. Murfree served as the 14th Superintendent of Schools in Albany, Georgia. Murfree is the architect of one of the most comprehensive mentoring programs in the country, known as Mentoring the 100 Way, now known as Mentoring the 100 Way across a lifetime. Dr. Murfree, the floor is yours.
They warned me because you couldn't hear me. I was talking. We want to thank Commissioner Natalie Hall of Fulton County. I want to miss that. We thank her for being here today and doing her moderating when we are going between the particular sessions. We want to thank the founder, the president, and I call him the CEO, my mentor, Thomas W. Doris Jr., who had the vision many years ago to come up with the National Black College Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame weekend from one day now to an entire weekend. We want to thank this afternoon each of you, and this morning, in case of Dr. Mark Alexander, if anybody else is on the West Coast, good morning to you as well. I want to thank you all for being here today. We want to have fun. We want to have a lively discussion about health and wellness, and we're actually here until 3 o'clock, about until 2:45, when they're making the switch over in between the next session that comes after the Health and Wellness Symposium. So I'm talking today from a city, Macon, Georgia. I'm not at my home in Fayetteville today, but I'm in Fayetteville, Georgia, but I'm in Macon, Middle Georgia. And so welcome to Macon, Middle Georgia, around the world. I want to start off and give you the opportunity to, in 2 to 4 minutes, give us who you are, what you're doing, and so forth and so on, whether you went to HBCU or not. If you didn't, it's okay. We got love for you still. Just go through and people want to hear that. And just tell us in 2 to 4 minutes, and then I'll take the time to get into the questioning. We'll start with Kimberly Wright, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. And we are just incredibly excited to have this discussion today. I am the Vice President of Health for the American Heart Association in Metro Atlanta. And so what that means is we are focused on health equity, addressing social determinants of health. So again, this is a timely discussion. As we know, COVID is shining the light on the health inequities. And so looking forward to the conversation about what we can do during this time, in addition to voting, which I know we're all ready to do. A little bit about me. I am a mother of two. I have a son who is in high school, and I have a daughter who is at North Carolina A&T State University. She followed in my footsteps. Very proud of that. So, of course, my mindset, I think of it as a person who is working in the health space, but also a parent who has a child that is in college, on campus, and trying to stay safe and healthy during this time. So that's all I have to share, and just looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for having me today.
You're welcome. Dr. Mark Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. Murfree. And greetings from Oakland, California. I am the National Secretary for 100 Black Men of America, and I'm also the chair of our Health and Wellness Committee. I'd like to acknowledge all of the brothers. We have over 50 members of our Health and Wellness Committee from all over the country who have a laser focus on improving the health of our people. I did not go to an HBCU. However, my career was forged at the University of Nairobi in East Africa. And my oldest son went to Dillard University. My second oldest son went to Alabama State University. And my youngest son went to Bowie State. So we have a very strong connection with the HBCU network.
Thank you, Dr. Alexandra. You did attend an HBCU with all that money going there. Thank you very much for sending it home, okay?
All right.
Okay, the next person from Dr. Mark, Dr. Harris.
Well, good afternoon and good morning to some. I am Dr. Patrice Harris. I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist here in Atlanta. I am the immediate past president of the American Medical Association. I served as the 174th president of the AMA, and I was the first African-American woman to do so. I also chair the AMA's opioid task force, and that's a critical issue that we need to talk more about in our community. I've chaired that task force since its inception. I also want to give a shout out to Commissioner Hall. I served as the health director for Fulton County for some years. And so I'm very happy to be with you today. As you heard earlier, COVID has really amplified and brought into stark relief so many fault lines in our society. And those fault lines are certainly not only those of us in the healthcare field to solve, but it really is going to take an all of nation approach. And this is certainly an important conversation. And I'm so honored to be here. I did not attend an HBCU, but my mother did. She attended Bluefield State College. Again, that's where I was born and raised, in Bluefield, West Virginia. So my mother attended Bluefield State College, and I grew up every year going to Bluefield State, West Virginia State homecoming. So I certainly have a kinship to HBCUs.
Thank you very much. Just like I told Dr. Now, your mother, you've certainly been to an HBCU, and if you went to one homecoming, it counts. Okay. Dr. Green, how you doing?
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Murfree. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm bringing greetings from Atlanta, Georgia as well. I'm the founder of the Ora Lee Smith Cancer Research Foundation and an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery at Morehouse School of Medicine. I am a proud alum of Alabama A&M University, but I have 3 degrees in physics and 5 years of training at the Comprehensive Cancer Center and a year in the Department of Pathology. And after having cancer devastate my family, I did a career change and developed groundbreaking technology using my background in lasers and nanotechnology that has already demonstrated complete elimination of human cancer in laboratory mice without chemo, radiation, surgery, or any observed side effects. And we are raising money through my nonprofit tech startup to begin human clinical trials.
Very good, thank you. Were you located at Alabama A&M, either in Huntsville or Norma, Alabama? And that was just a tease. Because when you get there, somebody say, Where's Huntsville? Where's Normal? But yeah, good. Thank you very much. Next we have on the line, Dr. Jackson. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you've been, and if you've been to an HBCU or not. It's okay.
So if that is Mandela Jackson, I will say that I am not a doctor. I know quite a few good doctors, but I am not. Hey, I am the Vice President of Neurology for Quest Diagnostics, and I'm glad to be on here with everyone. I am a proud graduate of the North Carolina A&T State University. I have been with Quest for about 11 years, and again, I lead the neurology division. We are a clinical lab company, so it's all about diagnosis that leads to treatment and prevention with the physicians here. Prior to joining Quest Diagnostics, I spent 16 years in the pharmaceutical industry. I was with Park Davis and Pfizer. And before that, I was a naval surface warfare officer serving my country.
Thank you very much. As we discussed today, and we started off, you heard people talking about COVID. Mr. Jackson, and when we were doing that, $1.9 billion was given to Pfizer to try to find a vaccine for the COVID-19 coronavirus. So let me start off the first question, and what I would do is I would let you fill in and be orderly. But the first question, how healthy are we in America as African Americans and marginalized communities? How healthy are we when we look at that? I want to go first.
Well, I'm happy to start, and just as we are not healthy, and we are not as healthy as our, certainly as our counterparts, and that is irrespective of insurer status. Now, clearly, if you have access to affordable, meaningful health coverage, you have an opportunity to be healthier. But we know when doing studies, particularly around maternal mortality and morbidity, even correcting for insurance, there are still health inequities between Black women and white women. We know people from communities of color live sicker and die younger in this country. And we have no further to look than COVID-19, which again has brought into stark reality that we are disproportionately impacted when it comes to COVID, when it comes to chronic disease, when it comes to certain cancer, when it comes to heart disease, when it comes to access to care for mental illnesses. I'm a psychiatrist. So, you know, I would say that generally speaking, of course, there are individual pockets of those who are healthier than others, but as a general rule and as a community, we are not healthy. But let me just say this, it is not related to what we are doing or not doing. It is related to long-standing structural inequities and other systems that I'm sure we will get into as the conversation continues.
Y'all rather for me to call your name, so I can do that to make it easy. Dr. Mark Alexander, you mentioned being with the 100 Black men, and if you want to take this from a different sphere, you can kind of tell us what to do. As we talk about some of the issues and concerns, we can also talk about solutions, because we certainly want to have our people on the air today to listen to that. But let's continue now. Dr. Mark Alexander.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Murfree. I'd like to echo Dr. Harris's comments. African Americans are suffering the greatest portion of the leading causes of death in this country: heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, cancer. And as she said, those conditions aren't based on genetic predisposition, but to social determinants of health, things like access to food and education and employment status, things like that. Right now, 100 Black Men is focused on COVID-19. That has our full attention. And we are doing everything we can to get out of this pandemic. We are partnering with a network of national organizations and community-based organizations to address the problems that people of color face when dealing with COVID-19. We are a part of the National COVID-19 Resiliency Network that is based at Morehouse School of Medicine, led by Dr. Dominic Mack. And our charge is to educate our people to the concerns that we have in terms of maintaining our health while there is no treatment, no effective treatment for COVID-19, and while there is no vaccine for the disease. So that has COVID-19 is on our front burner, but there are many other issues that we're addressing that are very important. And as soon as we get out from under the veil of COVID-19, we've got to address youth health and fitness. That's a very serious problem because we found that nationally, many of our children don't have physical education in classrooms. They don't have the structure for recreation in their communities. And so we have to find creative ways to get our kids fit. And because of the sedentary lifestyle and because of the poor access to food, nutritious food sources, many of our children are developing adult onset conditions such as type 2 diabetes and hypertension. We're actually putting children on hypertension medication in elementary school. And that's the sign of a decaying civilization as far as I'm concerned. We are also dealing with the issue of violence in our communities that kind of leads to this sedentary lifestyle. Many parents keep their kids inside because of the violence that awaits them in our communities. So we have a very robust violence prevention action group led by Dr. Michael McGee in Chicago. We are also addressing brain health. There are some very disturbing studies that are emerging that show that contact sports that our kids are involved in are leading to cognitive and behavioral disorders that don't bode well for their futures. We're also addressing cancer. We put a lot of energy and resources into developing clear and concise guidelines for the early detection of prostate cancer and breast cancer and colon cancer. And it's very important that we get back to that issue. And then finally, we're launching a transformative initiative that we're calling Healthcare 2.0. And I'll let some of the other panelists speak now, but we can discuss that initiative later in the discussion.
Sounds great. I could see Dr. Green is ready to answer that question. How healthy are we as African Americans and marginalized communities in America? Dr. Green, I could see she was smiling. She was ready for it. So here you are.
It's amazing what we can see from our mind's eye. I was just smiling because I agree with Dr. Alexander.
Oh, okay.
But I'll take the question. I think that if I can echo Dr. Harris and Dr. Alexander's sentiment that they gave very, very thorough answers. From my perspective as a physicist who is now a cancer researcher, I think that I'll broaden the scope of the conversation just a little bit in the direction of cancer. Most of the time, early detection can save lives. Early detection, screening, and early treatment. Because a lot of times we don't want to receive the standard chemotherapy and radiation treatment, and we get underdiagnosed, misdiagnosed, told that we can tolerate pain more than other people. So our health disparities are showing up in cancer. It's impacting, COVID is impacting cancer patients and our participation in medical research and clinical trials. We're not recruited to clinical trials the way that other groups are. So there are a couple of things that when I'm analyzing how healthy are we, it's some of it are things that we're doing. It's our stress levels, our exercise practices, our dietary practices, and a lot of diseases that may be considered hereditary sometimes it's because our recipes are hereditary. And then the case with my family, my aunt who raised me said that when she was diagnosed with stage 4. And a lot of times we don't have the conversation about what happens in our community when we're diagnosed with stage 3 or stage 4 cancer, when so much focus has been on early detection. And there's this almost castaway segment of our society where if you get diagnosed with stage 3, stage 4 cancer, and the data doesn't support the eradication of stage 4 cancer with the current technologies that are available. And a lot of people justify the suffering cancer patients experience with the addition of the possibility of 2 extra months of life, which I'm not discounting, but a lot of people in our community would rather not opt in for chemotherapy and radiation. And so I'm receiving a lot of members of our community who don't want the standard of care chemotherapy and radiation because they don't want to experience the side effects. And my aunt, who was the only mom I knew, that was her story. So I have a specific affinity for people in that situation as having the experience of being her caregiver. So the technology that I developed is to help us when we are beyond the standard of care, when people are sent home and told there's nothing else we can do, and they're looking for alternative medicines that aren't approved by the FDA, and we don't understand when something is safe, when something is experimental, when something is approved and adopted by the American Medical Association, and what that journey is. And people explore these alternative medicines out of desperation. And I think that's something that needs to be part of the conversation with our organizations in the forefront to discuss how do we evaluate what options are available when someone is sent home and told there's nothing else we can do. And there is a disparity, not just in healthcare, but in the funding of African-American scientists and having African-American scientists participate in the evaluation of new devices and new interventions, and particularly with the evaluation of the COVID-19 vaccine. And I think that we have to have a broader conversation about not just what are the problems, but what are the solutions, and having our scientists come to the forefront and get the support of the community that's so needed, not when they need the treatment, but when the African-American scientists are in the process of translating technology from bench to bedside and getting that support that's not, where we can create affordable health care from the part of funding from the scientists initially, instead of going through the traditional business models of getting investors and selling to the pharmaceutical companies. So we don't have ownership of our technology, ownership of our intellectual property. So we can't control how affordable the healthcare is for members of our community. And that also creates another disparity.
Thank you very much. Loaded. Great information. Now, Dr. Wright, I know I can see Dr. Wright, she's ready too. And Mandel, I'm coming your way. People wanted to talk about COVID. I'm trying to go through these questions that I sent you all, but I see that I might not be able to. We're going to jump straight on COVID in a few minutes, and we're going to start with Mandel. Is that cool? But right now, we're going to hear from Dr. Wright. Dr. Wright, how healthy are we in America?
So first of all, thank you for calling me doctor, which I am not. I am on a panel of all these great doctors, but I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying. And what my mind goes to, because we're thinking about when I think of our pipeline of the future doctors, are students that are on campus or in their communities today. And so, yes, we are not healthy, but there are things that we can do today individually, and students can do, and our families can do. So the one thing I want to speak to is about advocating and doing things locally. There are things that you can do to change whether it's your policy, and that's a fancy way of saying it, but if you're in the middle of a food desert, how do you find the resources to get the local farmers to be able to set up those pop-up farmers market, perhaps to feed the senior citizens who can't necessarily get out because of COVID? So that's something that I really want people to think about, the power that they have now. I don't care how old you are. And then on the campuses in particular, when I think about the pipeline of our future scientists, researchers, et cetera, I think it's important that our college campuses make those tough and unpopular decisions to make the campuses healthy. Thinking about how they're negotiating their agreements with the vendors and food services providers. So while we may historically love fried chicken, guess what? There is an opportunity for the campuses to change policies today to say we are only going to serve certain things to our future leaders. We don't want these students leaving campus with hypertension. We don't want these students leaving with heart disease. So thinking about that, so I think it's important also that we equip our students, and they can use their voice to change those policies on campus as well. Also, Dr. Alexander, you talked about the fact that our streets aren't safe. So while you have individuals that are focused on making streets complete, so there are sidewalks, well, guess what? A sidewalk might not be safe because it's in the middle of a high crime area. So what can you do today to help reduce the crime in the area? Whether you advocate and use your voice, whatever voice you have, move from a whisper to your inside voice, an inside voice to a shout. But what I think about too in the politics and voting, again, things that you can do and advocate and change today, because at the root of chronic disease and illness is nutrition and physical activity. So what can I do as an individual? What can I do as a parent, as a community member, as a student? So that's what I just wanted to add to the conversation.
Thank you for adding that. I always tell people when you are moderating something, and when you're health and wellness, and I don't mean any harm by this, all of the things that I got was doctor. So that's how I got it. I mean, no harm by that, just calling y'all doctors. I wasn't assuming, but it was because everybody says, everybody on here was a doctor. I said, I know I can read. Okay, now we know. Mr. Jackson.
Yes, sir.
The question, since people want to get into this COVID piece, what are your views on vaccine distribution for COVID-19? When and if it happens? What are your views on that? We're going to get everybody else to throw something in on that as well. Your views. If there were a vaccine, they were testing for a vaccine, talk to me.
So I will say up front that my views are probably more personal than they are tied to my industry. So my personal view is formed from my history in the pharmaceutical realm. So this is not about clinical diagnosis where I am now. I'm a proponent for vaccines. I believe that it's very easy for us to dismiss the importance and the value of vaccines historically. And I think that now this vaccine that's on the table has a lot of political considerations. There are some considerations that weren't on the table with a lot of other vaccines that we've benefited from, but it's historical. I do, though, think that there are some positions on this vaccine that get muted, again, because of the politics. I do think that vaccines need to be smartly vetted. I do think the research for these vaccines needs to be rich and deep and vetted and credible and trusted. And I think that there are some things, again, that get muted about this sensitivity with this vaccine. The fact that African Americans aren't raising their hands to be in a clinical trial should not shock anyone. If it does, I just don't understand it. But then we have the dilemma as Blacks who have a voice that have to share a sensitive message. The fact is, without Blacks and other minorities being a part of some of these smart clinical trials, there is always going to be the question of efficacy and effectiveness for our community. And so I see it through two very different lenses. I don't want to have a vaccine that's rushed out to the street regardless of who is in the trial, because most side effects typically don't present en masse enough to measure until 2 to 3 months. And then that really depends on the compound. I think it's got to be vetted. There are a number of ways to enroll volunteers. There's some proven methods for enrolling minorities. You just can't rush it. It means you have to slow down. You have to get the right authorities. You have to have someone who understands the protocol and how to enroll. The data is out there. So I am a proponent for vaccines. I just think it needs to be developed and introduced to the street smartly.
Dr. Harris, vaccine.
Absolutely. And I also want to state up front that vaccines are important in preventing death and disease and disability from preventable infectious diseases. We don't have measles outbreaks. We don't have people with polio or smallpox. But what is different, just as Mr. Jackson just said, what is different right now, and this is quite unfortunate, perhaps even tragic, is politics have insinuated themselves into what should be and must be a transparent, apolitical, science-based, evidence-based process. And what should dictate whether or not a vaccine, passes and obtains FDA approval should be the science and not the politics. And so I think we could probably all agree on that. That's why at the AMA, we've called on the FDA to make sure that there is a transparent process, that the process that is used for a vaccine for COVID-19 is the same, has been others. Now, you also ask about distribution. And that is an important part because some people sort of think, we have a vaccine and that's the end. Of course, it's the production and the dissemination and the distribution and to whom and when. Now, we all need to be clear, the data is still out on that. It will depend on the vaccine. It will depend on the data from the vaccine, whether it works best on a particular age group. And so we will have to wait. I actually see a positive for thinking about the distribution right now, because the more things we can think about, and also part of that conversation should be the equitable, sort of planning for and thinking through the equitable distribution of vaccines, again, based on the science and who it works best for. So I guess I think the bottom line is we need to make sure that the science and the process is transparent, that is vetted by those professionals who always vetted, and that we do have, and I agree regarding clinical trials, understand, and two things can be true. We understand why communities of color aren't volunteering, and I get that, and I believe in meeting people where they are. And some of us can work within our own spheres of influence to make sure folks have the data so that they can make an informed choice about whether or not they want to be part of a trial. So that is true as well. So all of these are components of the conversation that we need to continue to have around vaccines from the production to the distribution.
Yeah, that's why I kind of framed it like that. But I can see now, Dr. Harris, Dr. Green is ready to give you the answer. Dr. Green?
I naturally smile.
Don't smile no more then. Hold on. You want me to skip you and go to Dr. Alexander, who's been smiling as well?
I'm okay. I just really appreciate Dr. Harris's perspective. It's quite refreshing. I did not come to the table with expectations, but as my personal perspective of COVID-19 and the vaccine and how this has been handled, my experience has been that some of my colleagues have not had that same perspective. So I've started just being quiet, but it was just very refreshing to hear Dr. Harris and Mr. Jackson share the sentiment of making sure things are vetted and making sure that we meet people where they are. Because personally, I have trust issues, and my trust issues are a reflection of our experience collectively. And My questions about the vaccine is, how can we not master the flu vaccine for a virus that we know and we see every year? And the annual flu vaccine is outdated according to the CDC, and the mutations for that virus are happening faster than we can develop a vaccine. And we have an unknown, if I can quote Samuel L. Jackson here, we have this unknown, and how can we develop a vaccine so quickly for a virus that we don't know and we don't understand, and like viruses do, is the nature of a virus to mutate. So how can we assure the community, assure people who may participate in the trial that this is safe, even if it meets the standards? It's just something that I'm having a very hard time trusting. The other component of this conversation that I think is important, there are companies that have been developing treatments and cures, and that has not been a large part of the national conversation. And I think that should be promoted and explored even more than it has been. It's like Bill Gates came up with the idea to have a vaccine, and that kind of became the global solution, when perhaps there are some other companies that have already developed cures that need support with their testing and their clinical trials, that those cures or those treatments may be a better option at this point until we can prove up and have evidence-based decision-making around vaccines instead of money or fear-based decisions around these vaccines.
Very good. You know, sometimes people say, I want to get a shot, but I'm afraid of the needle. That'll certainly get a smile. Dr. Mark Alexander.
Yes, sir. I'd like to offer an epidemiologic perspective on vaccines. I think we would all be perfectly safe if we stayed quarantined in our homes, and when we ventured outside, that we wore our masks and that we socially distanced and we maintained good hygiene, and we embraced a strategy for immune enhancement as recommended by 100 Black Men of America. But nobody wants to really live that kind of life. We want to travel. We want to get on planes and visit our families. We want to go out and recreate. We want to go to shows. We want to go to restaurants. And that can't happen until we achieve herd immunity. Herd immunity occurs when a large proportion of the community becomes immune to a disease, making the spread from person to person unlikely. And as a result, the whole community becomes protected, not just those who are immune. Now, how do we achieve immunity? A prior infection to COVID-19 may confer some degree of immunity. And then the only other way to become immune to COVID-19 is through immunization with an effective vaccine. Right now, it's estimated that about 11% of our population is immune based on prior exposure to the COVID vaccine, to the COVID virus. And epidemiologic models suggest that we need a minimum of 60% of our population to be immune to COVID-19 before the rest of the folks in our population, in our communities who have not been immunized will be safe from the virus. So I think the only thing that's going to get us out of this situation, get us out of our homes, is an effective vaccine. So I too am a proponent of it, but and I would agree with my fellow panelists that it can only be done when it's not rushed, when there's no political pressure on drug manufacturers, when there's no pressure put on our federal health agencies that we have traditionally looked to for solid support, who we could depend on with good integrity and based on scientific fact, providing our nation with good information, solid information, and nothing that is based on politics. So until we get to that point, I think we're going to have to just stay indoors, keep wearing our masks, and just be patient until we can get effectively vaccinated.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Alexander. I noticed too, I watch your faces like a coach on the sideline. So I noticed when you say stay at home, I saw Ms. Wright lean ahead. So it's her time, Ms. Wright. Vaccines. You're actually on mute. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so seeing that I'm not a doctor, I agree that, you know, with what everyone is saying, especially with the trust factor. I also think about, I have to go back to the community side of it and thinking about in the meantime, while we are waiting on this vaccine, in the meantime, while we are waiting on the potential cure and the potential treatment of, and food is medicine. And so taking your high blood pressure medication is needed during this time, because 7 out of 10 individuals who are hospitalized have high blood pressure. And who has the greatest high blood pressure? Black men. So if we can think about in the meantime, what can we do to stay healthy, to reduce our risk, no matter the timing of the solution coming, because if not, we're just going to keep dying. And it's really just that simple. Again, the addressing obesity with our youth. Dr. Alexander, you talked earlier about youth and obesity, and we need to address that later. We need to address that now. Simple things like water access. Most people don't think about the tie between water access and COVID. So water fountains are nastier than toilets. They are germier than toilets. But these kids are going back to school, right? They need water. And a lot of the older schools, they don't have a water bottle to stay hydrated, to help with their brain health, to help with their performance. So thinking about water access in our communities that have the greatest need, retrofitting water fountains with water bottle filling stations. So that's where my mind goes, is in the meantime, what can we do while people are hungry, while people are dying, and thinking about how we can protect ourselves. Going back to the HBCUs and our students, what can they do to protect themselves and their families? Because you think of the family makeup that they're going back to from their break, if they are on campus, a large number of their parents and grandparents are suffering with chronic disease, which puts them at greater risk for chronic disease. So again, what can we do today to protect our families, ourselves, and our communities?
You open it up.
Murfree, if I could, before we leave vaccines, because I want to, make sure and amplify a couple of points that my fellow panelists made, because I think several people talked about trust. I talked about trust and mistrust, and I talk a lot about you have to earn trust. And one way you earn trust is to make sure you are providing accurate information. And I know we at the AMA, and I personally have tried to be super scrupulous and pristine when talking about these issues, because one statement, and again, there are conversations that I might have with other doctors and scientists and other epidemiologists, and a little looser, but when you're having public conversations, you have to be so pristine. And I take on the added accountability of being super pristine as an African-American woman, because I know the history of Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks. And so it's so important. So I did want to just add, and I wanted to answer Dr. Green's question about the flu, and there does need to be a new flu vaccine every year because viruses are everywhere. They are ubiquitous. And Dr. Mark Alexander can probably help me with this. And they will always be here. And so every year there are a new set of viruses. And by the way, this coronavirus, the one that's causing COVID-19 is new, but the family of coronaviruses is not new. And those are that family are the viruses that causes colds and things like that. So every year there's a new virus that is primarily responsible for the flu. And that's why we need to have a new flu vaccine every year. And oftentimes it's more than one. There's a vaccine, I know this year that's developed, don't need to know the details, but for seniors. And then there are vaccines, the nasal spray that are more appropriate for children who don't like needles. So we have to be real scrupulous about that and make sure that I wanted to answer that question of why we need a new one every year and what we know and what we don't know about this one. And, you know, the entire scientific community, I would say the entire scientific community that has made a commitment to follow science and evidence knows and believes that we need to have a vaccine. But Dr. Alexander made a good point. There is no one panacea here. It's a vaccine. We could have a vaccine tomorrow and we would still need to mask and watch our distances because, you know, it's all of those layers of protection that get us to maximal safety. And I wanted to say one more thing, and thank you for the indulgence about herd immunity, because I know there's been a lot of conversation about that. We have, I hate to use the word never, but let me just say this, herd immunity has typically been discussed in the context of a vaccine. Right. We've never really talked about herd immunity as, you know, everyone just allowing themselves to get sick, because a lot of people will die. And so when we talk about herd immunity heretofore, it's been in the context of scientific conversations around vaccine. And I just wanted to make those points.
I really appreciate that, Dr. Harris. You mentioned something that took me to this whole conceptual framework of social emotional development by Erik Erikson, the trust versus mistrust. And you hit that and you line everyone up. Let me take it to this level. What impact does COVID have on chronic disease? And Ms. Wright kind of started that as she laid it out, and Dr. Alexander started saying where we are with high blood pressure, where we are with diabetes and so forth and so on. So I'm gonna go down to Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, when you think about that, what impact does COVID have on chronic diseases?
So I think this is going to be interesting because the lens that I'm looking at this through is very different from everyone else's. So I'm anxious to hear what everyone else says. For my view, remember, I look at diagnosis. So the march to cure begins with, you go symptom, SMART, accurate diagnosis, treatment, cure. When you look at some of the unexpected consequences of COVID, from our view, we're seeing a couple things. Everything around infectious disease, lots of focus, lots of talk, and of course, anything directly related to COVID, a lot of talk. Well, our performance is measured around volume. We look at volumes of testing, and that links to trends of diagnosis. When you look at some of the other disease states, and we focus on about 8 disease states at Quest, the volume of diagnosis dropped as high as 52% in some of these chronic disease state areas. I'm a salesperson by trade, but I'm a very concerned person when I look at some of the healthcare trends, because, well, some of the trends that could be developing, because our testing is about getting accurate diagnosis, taking the guesswork out. When a patient presents to a physician, there are a number of options for getting diagnosis. Quest is about getting accurate diagnosis as quickly as possible to prevent illness, to prevent unnecessary costs, to prevent delayed action. Well, in a number of disease states now, the volume just stopped. So the question is, what's happening in some of these chronic disease states where we know if you're not going to get treated, you're probably going to die? And the fear around COVID hit the African-American community very quickly. So some of the disease states that have already been mentioned, when I look at volumes outside of neurology, and I see that the volume of patients going in for treatment dropped as high as 52%, my first question is, what are these people doing? Are they ignoring symptoms? Are they praying that they go away? Are they, what are they doing? So I do think that there are some unexpected consequences. So now that the volume is starting to return, I think Dr. Alexander mentioned something that we're seeing. Now we're seeing that there are some unexpected medical consequences of COVID. The most requested bit of information from our company right now is around the neurological complications of patients who have come through COVID. That's my shop. We're seeing things from stroke to peripheral neuropathy to every week we have to actually update the material that we're trying to share with some of our providers because it's changing every day. So again, there are some unexpected consequences outside of COVID. And now we're seeing that there's some unexpected consequences related to COVID. And the reality is the consequences of them are mounting far quicker than we can figure out what the smart response should be to get it under control. But I love to see how that relates to what some of the physicians are seeing.
You know, we're talking about the vaccines, and I do have a question on the whole concept of, you all are probably familiar with remdesivir. What do you know about remdesivir as a cure for this? And I'm gonna start with Alexander, that they actually treat patients in the hospital setting, but there has been some news they treat patients with remdesivir when they find out that they actually can afford the medication for a week or for 2 weeks. Mark.
Well, remdesivir is currently undergoing clinical trials right now, and I believe they're in phase 3 of the trial. So it's been shown there's some promise to that medication, but we're not out of the woods. So we really don't have an effective treatment for it. Right now, our best strategy until a vaccine and an effective treatment is developed is for us to social distancing, masks, and hygiene. Now we have found that, I mean, there are studies that have shown that many of the people who have been particularly hit hard by COVID have had vitamin D deficiencies. And Black people have a very large percentage of African Americans have low vitamin D levels in their system. And vitamin D is an essential element to our immune systems. So that's why the 100 recommends that people, particularly African Americans, take at least 10,000 international units of vitamin D each day to help restore their immune system. You heard of this cytokine storm where there is an intense reaction from your immune system. Your immune system starts fighting your own body, the cells in your own body, that plunges you into near death or death situations as a result. And vitamin D has the ability to help mediate that response. And we've also found that taking turmeric, which is a natural anti-inflammatory agent, can be very helpful in helping with your immune system. And we've also found that taking zinc can be very beneficial too, because zinc blocks the ability of the COVID virus from bonding to our lung cells. So, the COVID virus attacks the respiratory system, the lung cells, and our people who have very high rates of COPD and asthma, we're at particular risk. So all of the comorbid conditions that African Americans experience could benefit from this immune strategy, and hopefully we'll have a treatment. But I'm not that optimistic in a quick and proven therapy for COVID at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Dr. Green?
Oh, this would be one of the examples of these treatments that I think don't get the coverage in the media that the vaccines do. And I think when you have breakthrough science, the default seems to be the skepticism, as opposed to how can we edify this particular or these type of discoveries that may eradicate the vaccine or may mitigate some of the symptoms. And I think science and evidence of how well this is working should dictate what gets supported, not whether it's popular or not. And I think just even unbiased evaluation and consideration of what's effective and what can be effective, and where do we put $100 million to support vaccines that haven't been proven or treatments that haven't been proven. And sometimes there's an agenda that's set for certain types of interventions. And I think that the promotion of vaccines happens to, it compromises the potential and the support that these type of treatments can get or do receive.
Thank you. I want to do something, and I want to take this to Kimberly, if that's okay. And I'm looking at the time and trying to look at all the players at the same time. But I want to ask this to you, Kimberly, and others can chime in. What was your immediate reaction when Mike Bloomberg donated $100 million to historically Black colleges and universities?
My immediate thought was there will be more Black and brown physicians, researchers in the future. So not just hopeful, and someone literally and truly investing in that. And that was my immediate thought. Because when we go back and we look at, that's important too, when you talk about the impact of chronic disease, people are literally dying in doubt. They don't want to call 911 because they're having a stroke or a heart attack because they don't want to catch COVID when they go to the doctor, right? So knowing that you have a pipeline of physicians and researchers, your child who is a doctor, you don't look at them a doctor to tell you, you need to call 911 is important. The fact that there will be a pipeline of future researchers that are going to focus on the whole person and figure out ways where people do not have to choose between their medicine and feeding their families, which is happening today. So that was my immediate thought, is there's hope for the future.
Well said.
Well said. Dr. Harris?
Yes, and I just have to comment on what Dr. Green says, and I love that, she talked about the need to have a fair-minded debate about how we spend dollars. I mean, and that's getting to voting and getting to being in the conversation about if there is a pot of $100 for research, where should we spend that? And I want to say that separate and apart from COVID, actually, personally, I do believe we should be spending it on both. We should be spending it on looking for vaccines, and we should also be looking for treatments. But I think just broader, we should always be willing to have a fair-minded debate about how we spend dollars and what we focus on. We've asked, for more data on race and ethnicity, and we need more work on health equity. So we should always have that, and also always be willing to have a healthy skepticism. I just want to remind people that in the early 1800s, anyone could put up a shingle and say, I concocted this in my kitchen and it's a cure for X, and anyone could do that. But certainly science has brought us a long way. And she said, anything should be dictated by the science. And I like that. I was thrilled because I know that we do not have the faces of our physicians in this country match the faces of our patients. I said that at my inaugural address, and we need that. And that's the first thing I thought of is that, and medical student debt, medical students are graduating with $200,000 and $300,000, sometimes $400,000 of debt. And that actually sometimes deters a student, particularly a student of color, from even going to medical school. It's a long journey. It takes a lot of time. You get a lot of debt. And so I was very glad. I hope others follow. And we really, speaking of another conversation we need to talk about affordability of higher education and medical school, all part of a larger conversation, and so many other conversations that we need to have to make sure there are more representatives from communities of color entering all health professions. But selfishly, I want them to enter medicine.
Yeah, when my niece just finished my Harry, and I say, where was Mike last year this time? Where were you?
I know we're over, I could tell a quick joke. I gave the, it's not a joke, a funny story. I gave the commencement address. I was so honored to at the Morehouse School of Medicine the same year that Robert Smith gave at Morehouse College. And so, of course, Robert Smith gave a gift, but I got a lot of texts, and I've always worked in the public sector psychiatrist. I'm not crime poor. I'm privileged to be a physician, but not Robert Smith money. And people texted me and said, are you giving millions of dollars? And I said, didn't you give the commencement address? I said, that wasn't me. So, but I'm so proud and hope more people help out our students.
That's great. Mandela, Mr. Jackson, I'm gonna come to you. What are your thoughts on the number of corporations jumping on the bandwagon now for disparities in healthcare? Several corporations jumping on. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. I think that it's gonna be a test for a lot of companies, because you're gonna have to decide, is this your flavor of the month or the quarter because of the social unrest, or is this something you're really serious about? And I'm not sure if too many people saw it, but a couple of weeks ago, President Trump just banned every government-sponsored program around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, if you look at what's your question, a lot of the programs on DE&I are the backbone and the platforms for the disparities in healthcare focus from corporations. So I think there is a growing fear now about how that will spill out from government-funded programs to corporations. But when I think about the number of questions I've gotten, the number of events I see on LinkedIn, the focus is at an all-time high. The question is going to be, how many companies actually put the funding in front of it? And then the next question is how effectively they weave it into their corporate strategy. It's one thing to put out a press release and say what you're going to do, but until it becomes transparent to your stockholders, your employees, and your customers, I don't know if the commitment is really sincere. It's how do you weave this disparities in healthcare focus into what you're promising to the street? I think that's what we have to wait and watch for, if that makes sense.
Good. Mr. Wright? Everybody's jumping on the band now. These corporations giving money. What are your thoughts on that?
To me?
Yes.
Oh, I agree.
You responded better when I said Dr. Wright than when I said Mr.
Oh, yeah.
So Dr.
You know
Wright.
what? Dr. Wright. Okay. Oh, so Dr. Wright. So I agree, but then I also see it as an opportunity, because what's also happening is they're jumping on the bandwagon and looking internally at their leadership and what it looks like. So some are making adjustments I also think about it's an opportunity for the Black leaders in those organizations to ensure that it's not the flavor of the month. So to strategically, if you are tapped, like I that's spiritual to me. You have been tapped, right? The door is open in an unfortunate time. But how are you as a leader in this organization going to make sure that it becomes the fabric of this company? This is part of your legacy. So I think those leaders have a responsibility to do that, to pay it forward, pave the path. So that's my view on it.
Dr. Green, not because you were smiling, but Dr. Green.
I was really trying to hold my smile back.
I know, I noticed that. I can tell you moving your mouth, say, oh, it's her time, it's time to go. Okay. What are your thoughts on that?
I know I'm supposed to have a question ready, and I was smiling because I'm like, he's gonna call on me this time, and I don't have my answer.
No. You know, you having all these corporations jumping on the bandwagon, as Mr. Jackson was talking about, and Ms. Wright was talking about. They're jumping on there now. These things are occurring in this nation, and we want these things to happen. Like Bloomberg, $100 million to HBCUs to increase the number of doctors who are African American, male, female, and marginalized communities. So what are your thoughts about this happening now with people jumping on the bandwagon to be a part of all?
So I'm going to say what I really think. And as I say this, I can hear Dr. Harris saying, this is a public forum. We have to be pristine in what we say publicly, and maybe she'll mentor me when we finish. but I'm thinking it's about time. I think that there's been such an inequity from the time the slave ships landed and all of the obstacles that our community has had to overcome to still be 10 paces behind and yet still have to perform 10 times better than everyone else to even have a chance to be considered for an opportunity, and may still train the person when they start a job to come in and be our boss. And so I think that it's time, it's past time, it's been overdue, and that people get nervous when you use the term reparations. I think it should be a lot more widespread, even a systematic approach to making the African American community equitable, because of how many years we worked for free. And when we did build our institutions like the Black Wall Street in Oklahoma and Rosewood, and having these economic centers erected and then burned down, and the disruption that caused to our progress, and having drugs flood the African American community, which disrupted our progress. And it's a miracle that our HBCUs are even still standing. And so I would implore anyone who has the resources to support our HBCUs, to support our Black-owned businesses, to support our Black hospitals, to support Black communities in ways that are substantial, impactful, and transformative. And not just have it be a talking point for advertising dollars, but to actually have a meaningful impact. And one of the things with my experience as an innovator, as a founder of a tech startup nonprofit, to be in a position to have a global impact with this technology. And if I can just, as a caveat, when I was introducing this, I didn't talk about how after one treatment, there's complete elimination of human cancer over the course of 15 days with no observed side effects. And I know that this has the potential to be transformative, not just here in the United States, but globally. And the technology is patent pending. And I wish somebody would come say, here's the resources to translate this from bench to bedside and get the FDA approval so that this can be offered in hospitals and covered by insurance companies. And we're doing the crowdfunding, and we just raised our first $1 million, which is huge because there have only been 32 African-American female tech founders to raise $1 million for a startup company, $1 million or more for a startup company. That shouldn't be the case. Like, I'm one of the first 100 African-American women to get a PhD in physics. I'm only 39. That shouldn't be the case. And so we need to not just infuse support financially, but infuse support with resources and opportunities so that I am not an outlier, but also so that I'm not the outlier here struggling to do something to help humanity. And so I think when you have people who are considered a standout, and it's humbling, and I appreciate the accolades and the awards, but to have true support. And I think when you have these businesses or individuals who are infusing money, that the support and the infrastructure is also important.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Murfree, could I share something really fast?
Okay, thank you.
It's tying to what Dr. Green just shared and what I had shared earlier. I will never ever be as pristine as Dr. Harris. I hope to be one day. And when I'm on a panel, I try to put a guardrail between what I do for a living and what we're talking about. But I think I'd be remiss in hearing Dr. Green. I'd be remiss if I did not say I'm proud of what Quest Diagnostics is doing. Hopefully some of you saw it. Quest Diagnostics did not sit on the sideline. Our CEO went to the board and got this approved over the weekend. We put aside $100 million specifically around disparities in healthcare. So when I spoke of what I think great looks like and how some companies will have this would be a litmus test of your commitment to diversity in healthcare and disparities in healthcare. It's, are you going to write that check? And are you going to weave this program into your corporate strategy? I mean, I am very proud to see that Quest Diagnostics is doing that. That is not an advertisement or a shameless plug, but in light of what we're talking about, I think it's okay for me to share it with you all.
Thank you very much. I was going to move because I know they'll cut me off soon, but I want to get to two more questions that I think are important, and then maybe one that's also important just to see your response. But Dr. Harris, I'm a psychologist and I hear you're a psychiatrist, and I heard Dr. Green and I heard Mandela, Mr. Jackson. It's like, let them know that clairvoyance and ESP works, because everybody says, Dr. Harris, it's like as if they're reading your mind and you're saying to them, you better say this without even saying a word. See, now she's smiling, Dr. Green. And so I want to go to this question, if you will, and I'm going to give you, Dr. Harris, a minute on this because you are in the field that you're in. What is the mental health state of our people in this nation?
Thank you. And I have to say one more thing, because I think people on this call have been pristine, because when I said pristine, I meant you are given the context. So Kimberly was pristine when she said, I'm not a doctor, because there are listeners out there, not that she's been giving any medical advice, but that's what we need to make sure. And so I will sometimes give my opinion, but I'm clear. I tell people this is my opinion, right? And sometimes I'm representing AMA today, but if there's something that I want to say, that I would say, this is Patrice Harris speaking here. That's what I mean by pristine. So we should say if an effective treatment is backed up by data on people, or has it just been tested on cells in a lab? That's what I mean by pristine. We need to tell the whole story. People on this call have, but unfortunately, a lot of folks out there are not. They're just saying stuff and confusing everyone without saying, well, yeah, okay, I said this, but you know what? It was just on a study of 2 people. Right, because it's a big difference if you studied something on 2 people and 200,000. So that's what I meant by pristine, is the full picture and the full context, because people die when all of us are health stakeholders, make claims that are not true. And that's just is something I learned in 3rd year medical school. I'm a bit obsessive about it. I accept that. And speaking of obsessive and a psychiatrist, I am concerned. We know survey after survey says that we've seen an increase in symptoms of anxiety, depressed mood, difficulty sleeping, decreased appetite. We even heard our former First Lady share her own feelings of how she's struggling.
I've shared, and I think this is a good opportunity to remind us all for self-care. The last 24 hours have been difficult. I know they've been difficult for a lot of people. Let me just speak for me as a Black woman. In the last 24 hours, I have felt, and I know Black women are not a monolith, but so let me just speak for me. I have heard and felt keenly unheard, unprotected, and unsafe in this country. And so we have to all, make sure we take that moment. And I have been sharing freely with colleagues that I am not okay. And I shared that even with the CEO of the American Medical Association right after Mr. Arbery was shot and killed here in Georgia. Because as a woman of privilege, right, I have the privilege of making a good living and working from home, and I wasn't okay. And I wanted to make sure that we were reaching out to all of our staff of color who I knew were struggling and likely feeling many of the same feelings. So we see all these symptoms now. By the way, that is on a foundation. We talked about chronic disease burden. African Americans don't necessarily suffer higher rates of mental disorders or even these symptoms, but we have less access to care, right? And if you talk about the opioid epidemic, when it mainly affected the Black and Brown community, our nation's response was incarceration. And now that, we see this affecting middle class and upper middle class white families, our response is treatment. Now, as a psychiatrist, and Dr. Murfree, you probably agree, I'm happy that we are talking about treatment, right? But we need to make sure that everyone has equitable opportunities for treatment as we talk about health disparities. And so I think that is the issue going forward, identifying these issues, naming them. We still have stigma in our community, right? And people think, well, you just need to pray harder, or you're a moral failing or a character flaw if you have a substance use disorder. So we have a long ways to go on many fronts regarding mental health. Now, I'm not one of those who are predicting this tsunami, right, after we get through COVID, but we should be prepared. We should use this time to prepare. We should make sure that there are systems in place right now. Kimberly said right now, we need to do some things right now, but also make sure that we have an adequately resourced mental health infrastructure, because it has been underfunded for decades. And that's the work we need to do right now, and hold people accountable. You talk about the people that are making all these statements. We'll see, right? It's about accountability and sustainability. We have to think about accountability and sustainability when we think about our mental health infrastructure.
Thank you. You're persuasive too, because you said, Dr. Murfree, you will agree. I noticed that. So let me go to this. They all paying attention. As we go to the end, let me do this in the closing statement. You have a minute to do this. They told me I have 6 minutes. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals, 5. Here we are. If you individually could give a message about health and wellness in this nation, where would you go to deliver the message? Who would be your audience? And what would you say? Start with Kimberly.
Ooh.
1 minute.
Okay, my audience, I'm just gonna, because this is off the top of my head, my message would be on the HBCU campuses as a mother. I put my brown mama hat on and say, if you don't wear your mask, you're going to be killing yourselves and killing your parents and your families and everyone else. Wear your mask, wash your hands, do what you're supposed to do, go to class and be great, because we need you for the future. That would be my message.
Thank you, Dr. Wright. Dr. Green.
So I would go live on Zoom, stream it to Facebook and Instagram, and I would try to reach as many people who care about the state of cancer care and believe that there is a better way to treat cancer, or there should be a better way to treat cancer and reduce the suffering. And I would make a petition for everyone to make the Ora Lee Smith Cancer Research Foundation their cancer charity of choice. It's Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. We have Breast Cancer Awareness Month coming up in October, and it would be amazing if especially our African American communities, our HBCU football teams, our Black churches would champion a Black-owned cancer nonprofit, and choose the Aura Lee Smith Cancer Research Foundation as their charity, a cancer charity of choice.
Dr. Harris.
I would work with Dr. Green, who's a physicist, and figure out a way to clone myself and then go to every zip code that is bearing a disproportionate burden of disease in this country. And I would meet with community influencers and members of the community. I would tell them I'm here, I'm listening. I would ask them what they need. And then I would take that back to partners that have resources to get our communities what they need.
Mr. Jackson.
I would go where I think I'm trusted most. That would be family, fraternity, church. So where I'm trusted most, and I think my message would be, if you haven't had a physical as of late, get one. Not seeing your doctor is not smart. Even if you don't think you need to, chances are you probably should. I think that's what my message would be. And then related to COVID, wash your hands, be safe, mask up.
Dr. Mark Alexander. You're on mute.
My audience would be preschools, parents groups, elementary schools, and I would encourage all Black students to not be afraid of mathematics and science and to study hard because we know that Black patients have much better outcomes when they're treated by Black doctors. And Black doctors, particularly Black male doctors, are disappearing. So I would encourage our pathways to medical school and careers in health sciences to improve dramatically among our children, and that they attend HBCUs that send them to top-notch medical schools.
Thank you all very much. You have been a wonderful panel. But I can see, because you mentioned a few minutes ago, I think Dr. Harris, about football. I know you thought about it. What was your immediate response? And you don't have to respond today. You can talk to this about your friends when you get home. When Deion Sanders became the head football coach of Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Dorch. And what a great panel. Give yourselves a hand for your great work.
The one thing you don't do can often influence what you can do for years to come. When you don't vote, you help create a world that's the opposite of the one you want to live in and lose out on the opportunity to protect that future for generations to come. Hi, I'm Crystal Brooks, a graduate of Fisk University and the reigning Miss National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame. Today, perhaps more than ever in recent history, our vote has the power to make a lasting difference that will resonate today and tomorrow, not just for African Americans, but for all Americans who believe we are a nation formed to ensure and protect the rights and freedoms of all people. As young adults, we're busy trying to figure out our own lives, careers, and futures. We have a lot of pressures to deal with already. But as important as those things are, without different leaders who support the fulfillment of our dreams and our right to pursue them, everything we're working for and toward becomes just that, a dream. But your vote matters. Keep the dream alive. If you're 18 years of age or older, don't walk, run to register to vote. There's not a moment to waste with the very important midterm elections only months away. Visit NBCAHOF.org for more information on how you can make your voice heard this November. Do your part. Vote.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I just keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom line. Ain't gonna let nobody, can't let them turn me around, Lord, turn me around. house. Turn me around, I need to keep on walking, keep on talking, because I'm marching on a freedom.
Another great discussion, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank all of our moderators and panelists for their participation today. It has been a pleasure to host these wonderful sessions with you. After the break, please return and join us for our annual Legacy of Leaders honors as we pay tribute to some well-deserving HBCU alumnus. Please take another quick break and return right here for our award ceremony. Again, on behalf of the National Black College Alumni Hall of Fame Foundation, thank you for joining us, and we will see you in a few minutes.